The Alpha's Silent Mate, written by Short Story Queen. Snow stung like ground glass against Thalia's bare ankles as the rope hauled her forward. The village slept with one eye open. Shutters cracked just enough to let a sliver of lamplight fall across the road. Voices followed her in the dark like stones thrown low and mean. Cursed girl. Tongueless. Debt paid. Her father kept both hands on the rope and never turned. He had not turned when the collector painted their lintel with ash. He did not turn now as frost burned red where the cord bit her wrists. The other men with him walked fast, eager to finish what they had begun. Dogs barked once, then whimpered back into silence. The fence at the edge of the fields rose out of the drifts, posts hunched like tired shoulders. Beyond it, the pines pressed close and tall. The forest did not move. The forest watched, eyes opened between the trunks. Amber, gold, dozens. A growl rolled out and spread across the snow the way thunder rolls across water. One of the men flinched hard enough to stumble. The rope jerked Thalia off balance, then steadied. She set her feet and kept going. "Leave her," the neighbor breathed. "They'll do the rest." Her father shoved Thalia to the fence line. The rope sawed her skin when it slackened. Wind poured cold down her throat and settled in her chest like iron. She lifted her head and looked straight into the trees. If she was going to be swallowed, she wanted to see the mouth that took her. The wolves held the boundary like a tide at full moon. The biggest of them, gray-black with a torn ear, stepped into the open and bared long, pale teeth. Steam rose from his breath and drifted. Thalia felt a pressure without weight settle over her sternum. A sense of being scented, measured, marked. A figure detached from the line of trees and walked forward. The wolves shifted to make room. The man wore winter black and a coat heavy with frost at the seams. A pale scar cut from the hinge of his jaw across a day's dark stubble. He moved as if the snow wasn't there, as if the world had been built to hold his pace. He reached the fence, put one palm to the post, and pushed. The wood gave with a quiet groan and opened like a door. No one on Thalia's side of the boundary breathed for a count of 3. The man looked at her the way a winter river looks at a body falling in, flat, deep, inevitable. Her father's voice scraped the air. Alpha Dominic. The name slid across the road and under the shutters like a draft. Thalia had heard it in the way people avoided the woods after dark. She had heard it in the way mothers pulled children closer when wolves sang on the ridge. Seeing the man behind the word stole heat from her body that the wind could not. He studied her the way a blade studies a throat. Amber eyes, steady and unreadable. The wolves around him settled into a quiet that felt like attention sharpened to a point. Eamon appeared at his shoulder, a man with quick pale gold eyes and a hunter's lean stillness. "Offerings again," he murmured, voice even. "These villages never learn." Dominic didn't answer. His gaze slid from Thalia to the rope on her wrists and back. The line of his mouth shifted, not toward a smile, toward something that might break if touched. "Name," Eamon prompted, looking past Thalia to the men who had dragged her here. "Thalia," her father said. "She cannot speak. Works hard. Eats little. Debt is settled." Dominic lifted his hand and the night reacted. Wolves went from low growls to nothing. The men behind Thalia went so still the rope stopped moving between their fingers. Even the wind seemed to pause to listen. Lyra came from the pines behind Dominic. Her fur-lined cloak dusted white, a dark braid, trailing frost. Her face carried the same bone structure as his, softened by sky-blue eyes that belonged to winter mornings. She took in Thalia's wrists and the torn hem of her dress. "Brother," she said, gentle but firm. Dominic did not look away from Thalia. "Lyra." In front of them? She tipped her head toward the houses and the eyes hiding in the cracks. "You intend to do this here?" "They wanted a spectacle," Dominic said, voice flat, and something like electricity moved along the wolves' backs. "They will have one." Lyra's mouth tightened, but she held. Eamon weighed the rope burns again and then the angle of Thalia's chin. His expression marked interest without warmth. Dominic stepped close enough that the steam of his breath touched her face. He did not reach for her. He didn't need to. His nearness worked like a pull on the strings inside her body. The scent of him was leather, pine, iron. Heat bloomed low in her chest, not desire, not fear. Recognition, maybe, of something with teeth. The change in his eyes was sudden and terrifying. Amber brightened to an animal ring. His pupils thinned. The air altered. A second presence shouldered up under his skin, old as the dark beyond the pines. Thalia didn't know its name, but the moment it came forward, her bones did. The wolf inside him spoke without sound. Mine. Dominic's jaw flexed as if bracing against impact. The wolves around him answered without voice, bodies tightening, heads dipping to catch a scent carried by nothing but the moment. He forced a slow breath past clenched teeth. The brightness in his gaze dimmed to something a man could wear again. "You bring me a mute girl to balance your ledger," he said, not taking his eyes off Thalia. "You think a human body weighs the same as coin?" Her father nodded fast enough to look like shaking. "The collector marked us. We can't pay the sum. He told us the old law still stands. Blood in place of silver." Dominic's attention flicked over the street and its watching cracks. "The old law stands," he agreed, and it was not comfort. He turned his palm slightly. "Cut it." Eamon stepped forward and sliced the rope clean with a practiced knife. Blood pricked along the chafed lines on Thalia's wrists, beads bright as berries in the snow glare. She did not rub them. She did not lower her eyes. That choice seemed to catch Eamon's interest. His mouth curled at one corner with the smallest invitation to underestimation. Lyra shrugged off her cloak and set it over Thalia's shoulders without ceremony. "You'll freeze," she said, voice low enough that it hardly became air. "Hold this tight." Thalia met her eyes and let a silent thank you rise there. Lyra nodded as if she had heard words. Dominic turned to the village at large without moving more than his shoulders. The power in him went outward like heat. "You will not cross my border," he said, each syllable quiet and heavy. "If you do, I will take more than a daughter." Shutters fell. A lantern guttered out. Dogs did not bark again. Dominic faced Thalia's father one last time. "You will forget she was yours." A swallow. "Yes." He looked at Eamon. The beta was already moving, mind reaching out along the thread that bound Bloodfang minds to their alpha. Thalia did not hear a word, yet the wolves shifted into a loose half-circle around her at the same instant, the order sliding through them with a speed no voice could match. She felt that flow brush the surface of her thoughts like cold water. The instinct to lean into it, to answer, flickered, and died the moment she remembered the nothing waiting back in the village. She did not belong to a thread. She carried no scent but fear and borrowed fur. If she ever had a link to anyone, it had broken long ago. "Move," Eamon said, and the pack opened a path through the fence. They left the last fence and its nailheads shining. The forest received them the way a cathedral receives a sinner, with deep quiet and taller shadows. Snow breathed under boots and paws. The wolves ranged ahead and to the sides, some passing so close Thalia could see the small snow cones resting in the fur at their elbows. The cold climbed her legs, numbing and then burning, and then nothing again. Lyra kept pace at her shoulder, adjusting the cloak when wind worried at it. Dominic did not look back. He did not need to. The world behind him behaved as if his eyes were on it. When Eamon tried to speak, Dominic's head turned a fraction, and the sound died with no one to witness the gesture. When the gray-black wolf with the torn ear drifted too near to Thalia's flank, Dominic didn't alter his stride. The wolf veered as if a wall had risen from the snow. Authority moved with him like a second body. Burrows pressed harder now that they were under trees, a hot, restless weight in Dominic's chest. Thalia felt that presence in her own body as a strange echo, a second heartbeat dragging in her rhythm. The wolf wanted to close distance. The wolf wanted to press a nose to the hollow above her heart and catalog the scent there until nothing else existed. Mine, closer. Dominic held the animal with iron will. Each time control slipped half a finger's width, the presence pushed forward, and the air between him and Thalia tightened until she had to swallow to breathe. She concentrated on the path on the slick shine of ice where a small stream crossed the trail. On the way, Lyra's breath came steady, no matter the incline. She did not look at Eamon when his attention traced the back of her neck. She didn't give him the flinch he was always trying to draw. They forded the frozen trickle at a bend where the ice held firm. Lyra touched Thalia's elbow lightly at the exact step that would have sent her sliding. "Almost there," she murmured. "Don't look at the walls until you're inside them." They looked back too hard. Thalia nodded. She hadn't planned to look. She had learned to watch only what she could control. Her breath. Her steps. The place where to put her foot next. The stronghold rose out of the trees as the hill rose, stone built into a spine with teeth, torches pricking orange against the blue-white. Horns did not sound. They didn't need to. Minds reached and answered. A ripple she could not hear but could feel, like a change in barometric pressure just before a storm. The gates parted slow and sure. Heat leaked through the gap and touched her cheeks like hands. They stepped through. The courtyard received them with firelight and the quiet of work done well. Wolves became people again near the doors, fur dissolving into winter hooks and boots and the soft hiss of leather. Faces turned toward Dominic and then turned away once they had taken his measure, and found the same answer they always found. A handful of warriors waited near the center. The tallest, a woman with shoulders like a yoke and a braid heavy enough to be a weapon, spoke first. "Tracks at the north ridge. Likely elk. No rogue scent. Scouts report Ronan's men buying salt and shafts in the copper market to the west. No banners near our line." Ronan's name pulled a small hard curve into Eamon's mouth. Dominic's posture did not shift, but the air tightened a notch. He sent a thought down the link without opening his mouth. Thalia saw nothing. She felt the decision ripple the yard. Double the western watch. Take the river path in pairs. Warn me if a single white-edged banner touches our snow. Acknowledgement brushed him from a dozen minds at once and disappeared. Lyra's gaze slipped to Thalia. She needs heat. Water. Salve. Dominic looked at his sister a beat, then the smallest nod. Eamon angled toward the keep doors to clear space. The wolves peeled away as if tugged by invisible thread. Dominic went first again, and the keep opened for him without anyone touching the iron rings. Warmth struck Thalia's face like a blessing she hadn't dared ask for. The entrance hall smelled of wood smoke, clean wool, wet fur drying by the fire. People moved past with baskets and blades and sleeping children. Some stared. Some offered the glance used for strays who had not yet learned not to bite. No one spoke to her. They climbed a narrow stair that curled the inside of a tower like a ribbon. On a landing halfway up, a girl burst from a door and nearly ran into Dominic. She stopped so fast her boots squeaked. Dominic lifted a hand, and the fear slid off her face like ice melting. "Mind your feet," he said. The words came out softer than anything he had used all night. Thalia missed a step and caught the rail. Lyra's hand hovered at the small of her back until she steadied. They reached a corridor of close doors and thick rugs that hushed footfalls. Dominic opened one near the end. A modest room waited on the other side, fire already built, bed neatly made, a narrow table with nothing on it but a folded cloth and a plain cup. The window was a bite out of the wall that showed nothing but snow and one pine branch, black and moving. "You stay here," Dominic said. "Food comes, water comes, you don't leave unless I say." Lyra crossed to the hearth and pushed a log into place with the iron. Heat climbed. She glanced at Thalia's wrists. "I'll bring salve, and something that fits." Eamon filled the doorway, eyes measuring, lazy as a cat that only looks sleepy. "Guard inside, Alpha?" "Outside," Dominic answered. Eamon inclined his head and was already moving again, calling a mind without using a name. Boots clicked at the far end of the hall a few breaths later, then stood still with attention focused forward. The sensation of being watched settled on Thalia's shoulders along with Lyra's cloak. Lyra touched Thalia's arm once, quick. "I'll be back." She left on quiet feet. The door closed. Dominic stood with his back to it and studied Thalia over the fire's low voice. She felt his look on skin as if it had weight. He crossed the room and stopped within reach. Up close, the scar on his jaw was a pale hook. A fine white line cut one eyebrow. His lashes looked too dark against eyes made for night. He took her left wrist in his hand and turned it to the light. Warmth soaked into skin that had forgotten it. He examined the rope burn for a count longer than a stranger would. His mouth thinned. "Fools," he said, not to her. "They think debt makes cruelty tidy." He let her go, and the heat of his palm left a print that faded slow. He looked toward the door as if he could see through it to the walls and the sky, and every blade of grass the snow had hidden. He didn't move for a handful of heartbeats. When he spoke again, the pitch lowered, made for close rooms and vows that bit back if broken. "You will not run. If you try, my wolves will find you before the air fogs from your mouth. If you scream, they will be the only ones who hear it." Thalia lifted her chin a fraction and met his gaze. She had no voice to answer with, but she had that. Something in his face shifted as if a memory had put a hand on him. He opened the door and stepped into the hall. He paused there a moment, palm flat to the wood as if testing its temperature, then drew his hand away. A command ran down the pack thread and came back yes from a dozen minds. No one entered this corridor unless he wished it. Pharaoh's paced in his chest, the wolf's want scraped bone. "Mine. Keep." Dominic walked away. The fire warmed the room until the ache thawed out of Thalia's fingers and wrists. She unfastened Lyra's cloak and folded it with care over the chair by the hearth. Sleep came in shallow drifts. Between them, she listened to the heat move over stone and to the quiet at the far end of the corridor, where a guard stood with attention fixed and mind open to the Alpha's pull. The warmth in her chest did not go. It pulsed slow and steady, answering a beat that wasn't hers alone. Outside, snow went on falling. Inside, a door had closed with the finality of winter, and the life on the other side of it shrank until it was only a memory the wind would carry away by morning. Lyra came back before the fire settled, arms full of practical mercy. She set a steaming bowl on the table, a small tin beside it, a folded bundle of clean clothes on the chair. "Eat while it's hot, then salve, then sleep. I'll fetch boots in the morning." Thalia dipped her head. The stew loosened something locked tight in her ribs. She cleaned the rope burns, spread the balm, and let the heat soak into aching hands. Lyra straightened the blanket on the bed as if order could anchor a life that had just been uprooted. "If anyone gives you trouble, tell me," Lyra said. "If you can't tell me, look for me." Thalia met her eyes and held them a moment. The thanks didn't need a voice. The door darkened. Eamon leaned in without crossing the threshold, a shadow that carried cold with it. "The corridor stays clear," he said. "Kitchens will send wood." Lyra didn't turn. They already did. Eamon's gaze slid to Thalia, weighing. "Eat. Thin bodies don't last long under our sky." Lyra's hand paused on the blanket. "You're done here." Eamon's mouth curved. He withdrew and the latch kissed the strike. Lyra rested her palm on the wood for a heartbeat, attention drifting the way minds drift when they catch the thread of the pack. The look cleared. "Post changed, you have quiet." She touched Thalia's shoulder through the cloak. "Sleep." Alone, Thalia washed quickly, changed into the thicker dress, and wrapped Lyra's cloak tight. The room's warmth felt unreal, too generous for a day full of ropes and stairs. Her body wanted to collapse. Her mind didn't trust anything that easy. She lay on top of the blanket, eyes open to the door, and waited for her heartbeat to slow. The keep shifted around her in low sounds. A door closing, a coal collapsing in the grate, a guard's boot scraping once on rug. Beneath the small noises ran a second current, almost sound, almost scent, the way air changes before snow falls. It moved through stone and fur and skin, the pack thinking together. She felt it approach the door and slide away. Every time it passed, the warmth in her chest answered, not with words, with a pulse that matched it and then retreated. Dominic tried to lose that pulse on the wall. He walked the north parapet until the stars seemed close enough to pluck. The ridge lay quiet, the river a dull band of iron, his patrols steady shapes against the white. Each report touched his mind and vanished, small threads that did not tangle. The only one that would not release was inside his own ribcage, pacing, pressed into him by the animal he'd held in check since the moment at the fence. Mine. Varos pushed the word into him until the edges blurred. He sent crisp orders because crispness kept him from turning around. He told himself the corridor outside the girl's room would hold. He told himself a closed door counted as a choice. He reached the corridor anyway. The guard at the end straightened without moving. Dominic didn't speak. The pack thread carried the quiet command well enough. Remain, watch, don't think near that latch. His palm found the door. Heat came through, low and steady, the hearth's breath. Under it, another steady beat that did not belong to him. Varos pressed harder. Take. End the question. Dominic turned the handle. Thalia was awake, propped on one elbow, eyes clear. She rose by the time the door closed. The new dress hung a little loose at the shoulders. The salve made her wrists shine. He stopped near the fire, closer than most men could stand with him in a room, far enough to keep the wolf from pressing his bones into hers just to prove the world was solid. He told himself this was a conversation he would have with any stranger brought into Bloodfang by village law. You came as the price of a ledger, he said. That is the only reason you are here. Do you understand? She nodded once. You will stay where I put you. His voice stayed even. You will not leave this room without my word. Another nod. If you are a knife pointed at my pack, I'll snap you like a blade at the hilt. If you are not. He left the sentence unfinished. Varos tried to finish it for him. The animal's intent flooded the gap with heat. He refused the shape of it. Her gaze didn't drop. The steadiness in it irritated him because it drew him. He wanted her to flinch. He wanted any reaction that could be sorted into a familiar box. Do you understand, he asked again, because if she moved, the thread between them might stop humming. Her lips parted. No sound. The space between them altered. It narrowed to a thin line he could not see and could not sever. Heat spread across his chest as if a hand pressed there from the inside. A presence that wasn't his stepped into the place where thought becomes command. Can you hear me? The words formed inside him, soft and clear. He went still. Varos lunged toward the source, teeth bared. The instinct to claim loud enough to be tasted. Dominic chose control over hunger, the way he chose, breath over cold. Again, he said. Not because he needed proof, but because denial requires ceremony. I don't know how I did that, and he took a step he had not meant to take. The link sharpened with the distance closing. He felt her fear, old and disciplined, the stubborn line under it, the weary patience of someone who had learned to survive by tucking her edges in. He pushed with his own mind out of stubbornness. Who taught you? No one. The clean truth in it left nothing to grab. He should have turned and gone. He didn't. Varos circled the same spot in him, the place above her heart that called like heat, calls cold hands. Mine. He lifted a hand and let it hover near her shoulder. He already knew the exact temperature of her skin without touching it. He dropped his hand and walked a slow, frustrated loop around the room, trying to burn the urge out on the corners. You are not pack, he sent. When a wolf leaves, the link snaps and the scent rots for months. You don't carry that smell. Her gaze flicked to the door and back, the link hummed again. I never had a thread to break. That honesty landed where almost nothing had reached him in years. He traded it for structure. Links like this belong to packs and to mates, a tiny flinch. Then stillness. He had not meant to throw that word, and it hung there anyway, white as breath, heavy as iron. Varos's satisfaction pressed against the inside of his ribs. She reached for the link with a careful touch, a question opened like a palm. He let her brush the surface of him, then felt something surge that wasn't a question. Heat shifted. The fire tilted. The room fell away. For a heartbeat, the world snapped into a different alignment, and he stood in a corridor slick with melting ice and blood. Torches shuddered. Boots hammered. A familiar figure came fast and low. Blade aimed for the soft place under his ribs with a certainty that only long practice gives. A ring flashed on the striking hand. He knew that ring. Wolves howled. The sound cut off like a throat cut clean. The vision broke. The hearth spat a single spark. Thalia's knuckles whitened on the table edge. He crossed the space and took her wrists, slow, careful, moving like a man approaching a wounded animal that might bolt. "What did you give me?" "I didn't choose it, it pressed through." Anger flashed, not at her, at the image that still left cold on his skin. The ring burned at the edge of his thought like a coal he refused to name out loud. Varos tested the air and found no enemy here, then fixed his focus on the single thing in the room the wolf wanted to protect. Mind guard. Dominic released her. He stayed close because distance made the thread hum louder. He forced his voice steady. "If it comes again, you tell me at once. You don't hold it. You don't try to make sense of it alone." A nod. He should have left. The map room needed him. The ridge needed decisions. The copper road would need a watch before dawn. He stayed because she lifted her hands a fraction, not pleading, asking, and the link brushed him again. "Why do you hate my quiet?" And it almost pulled a laugh from him. It would have sounded like something breaking. He gave her the only answer that wouldn't curdle in the link. "Because it makes me want to fill it," Varos approved. The approval made control feel thinner than he liked. He turned away from the bed and toward the door, because discipline lives in motion. The guard at the end of the corridor shifted his weight like anyone would near midnight, and Dominic felt it through the thread and used it. A reminder that the rest of the world still existed beyond this room. "You are not a curse," he sent, and felt how badly he needed that to be true the moment the thought left him. Relief moved through her like heat poured into numb hands. Under it lay something harder, the rock she had stood on all evening. He respected it, even as it irritated him. "If you fight the link, you'll bleed yourself dry," he said. "If you lean into it, it gives back what you feed it. Either way, the pack cannot smell weakness on you. If they do, they'll test it." Her eyes sparked. He recognized that spark. Stubbornness. Survival. The part that won't lie down for anyone. Varos pushed one more word through both their bodies: "Keep." Dominic put his palm flat to the door, felt heat come through, felt the steady beat under it that matched the one that had been steady in him for years. He opened the door. "Sleep," he said. "This latch won't lift for anyone but me or Lyra." Her gaze answered without sound. He stepped into the hall and closed the door quietly. The guard's attention tilted, then reset. Dominic pulled the pack thread and set his orders with clean precision. "Rotate the post every hour. No minds in that room. If any scent near this door turns wrong, lock the corridor and call me in the link. Not with your mouth." A scent washed back in layered voices he knew, each one a line that tied the keep together. He went to the map room and stood over inked rivers and carved ridges until his jaw unclenched. The vision's fragments kept surfacing. He finally let himself look straight at the piece he had avoided. He named the ring. Fury lit him clean. He pulled Eamon's mind to the front of the thread the way a hand pulls a rope. "Reporter, patrol set. Western Ridge quiet. Traders moved through the copper market. Ronan plays at peace. Do you want the river swept at first light?" "Yes. And the road. White-edged banners do not touch our snow without warning." "Understood." Dominic let the line go and stared at the map until the fire behind him sounded like breath. The keep settled into the deepest part of the night. Snow leaned on roofs. Wolves slept in pieces, one ear always awake. The corridor outside Thalia's room stayed still. Inside, she lay with eyes open to the door until the thread humming at the edge of her thoughts smoothed into something like a hand set over a racing heartbeat. Warmth seeped where cold had lived. Sleep came not as a fall but as a tide, in and out, and in the place between the waves she felt the steady answer from somewhere else in the keep, an echo to her pulse that she did not understand yet, and already trusted more than the thin rope that had dragged her here. Dominic held his breath over the map until the tightness at the bridge of his nose throbbed. The ridge, the river, the copper road, lines and carved edges that had always behaved, blurred, then steadied. Varos pressed hard against bone, a patient, prowling weight. Mine, the wolf pushed, voice without air, certainty without mercy. That word breaks empires, Dominic muttered to the empty room, then chose stillness over the shift pulling at his muscles. He could burn this restlessness on 4 legs and snow, but the last thing the keep needed was its alpha running the walls like a starved shadow with the winter at his heels, and a vision pounding behind his eyes. The ring in that vision would not stop burning at the edge of thought. He put a name to it again, and felt heat roll through him so clean it sharpened everything else. Eamon's mind had answered the pack thread clear as a bell. Patrols set. River swept at dawn. Copper road watched. The ease of that reply should have settled him. It didn't. The future had tried to put a knife under his ribs with a hand he trusted. He could ignore it or use it. He had never been any good at ignoring knives. The keep shifted around the deep hour with the quiet of a body changing sleep sides. He sent a thin line of thought along the link. Lyra. A coil of winter blue attention rose at once, warm under steel. Awake and at the door. Good. Watch Eamon on the west. No eyes on him. Only ears. Understood. He let the line go. The air tasted of ash and old pine and something sweeter that didn't belong to the map room at all. He stood very still until he realized the sweetness was memory of the salve on Thalia's wrists, clinging to his palm. He rinsed his hands in the basin until the scent thinned. It didn't leave. Varos paced. Keep. He left the map as if it were a conversation set down mid-argument and took the stairs with silent steps. The guard at the corridor end straightened invisibly, attention tilted to him like a field of long grass tipping to wind. No one moved toward the door, no mind touched it. Good. He set his palm to the wood. Heat came through. Under it, the same steady beat that had matched his earlier, a counter he trusted more than he wanted to trust anything tonight. He opened the door. Thalia was at the window, bare feet tucked under her on the sill, Lyra's cloak wrapped close. She had cracked the shutter an inch and let the room taste winter. Moonlight lay on her face in a pale stripe. At the sound of the latch, she turned. No flinch. No scramble to hide from being caught gazing out at a world that hadn't asked her to belong to it. He stepped in and closed the door softly. The quiet seemed to press them closer. The fire murmured to itself, a steady, patient sound. He moved toward it, and then toward her because not moving made the thread hum louder. She slid off the sill and stood small and straight in a dress too big at the shoulders but worn like armor. He stopped close enough to see the faint sheen of balm on her skin and the rhythm at her throat. His voice stayed low. You sleep as if someone might take the room away if you trust it. A faint lift of her chin. You don't have to trust me, he went on, but you will obey me. No nod this time, her gaze held. The refusal was small and absolute. It should have irritated him. It steadied him instead. The link tightened, a subtle turning of a key in a lock. He didn't reach for it. It reached for him. Her thought brushed his, a quiet step in a quiet hall. Will you obey your own warning? He almost smiled. Which one? The one that says a man who believes his own power too much becomes the danger he guards against. His breath went out in a sound that wasn't laughter and wasn't a curse. You put that in my head. You left the door open. He pictured a door. He could close it, he could slam it and bar it and salt the threshold with will until even ghosts turned away. He didn't. The thread between them hummed, and everything in him that loved discipline hated that he liked the sound. Varro slid forward, not in a rush, in the slow, inexorable way snow fills prints and erases them. Mine. He turned from the window because if he kept her there with cold air on her skin, he'd have an excuse to set his hands on her shoulders and pull her away. He took 3 steps that felt like distance and discovered they weren't. The room's scale had bent around them. You carried a vision through that link, he said. You didn't choose it. It chose you. A small breath. She rubbed her wrists once, careful not to pull at the tender skin. The thought came clean. It arrives like weather, I feel it gather, then it breaks. Clouds to knife, he said. Convenient? Never. The single word had weight. He almost asked for a history to go with it, then pushed the urge away. If he let her life into the room, it would multiply. He had learned to keep histories outside the circle of the fire for good reasons. He moved nearer in spite of them. Walk me through the shape. Cold first, a sound repeating, a thing I know but won't name until it's too late. Then the choice I don't want to offer, and you don't want to take. Choice, he repeated, eyes on her face. Every vision has one. Some are knives disguised as doors. Some are doors disguised as knives. What was the choice in the corridor? You know it. He did. It lay at the center of the image like a coin in ice. If he reached for it barehanded, he would lose skin. He shifted instead to the part of the picture he could hold without bleed. The ring, he said. Her gaze slid away and then back. No denial. He sent a thought along the pack thread without moving his mouth. Amen. A breath only. Where on the west are you? On the trees above the river bend, 3 wolves below me, clear so far. Eyes on the road, first light, no errors, none. He closed the line. Thalia had felt it go. That surprised him. Most humans, even the ones who slept under wolf roofs for years, could not sense the passage of minds unless they were caught in it. You feel the link move, he said. I feel the weight shift in the room when you open your head to the pack. It pulls the air. That was new, useful, dangerous. He held that knowledge like a blade covered in cloth. Varros pressed again, patient as ice melting at noon. Mine. He faced Thalia fully. Earlier, when you reached me, I told you what links like that usually mean. He let the word fall because leaving it hanging in the room had its own kind of power. Pack. Or mates. Her fingers tightened on the cloak's edge. The small reaction landed like an echo between ribs. You want to know which this is, he said. So do I. The thread vibrated. Her thought brushed his again, almost a whisper. What if it is neither and both? He stood still so he wouldn't break anything delicate by moving too fast. Impossible. Everything about tonight is that. He didn't disagree. The fire cracked once as if the room had laughed in their stead. He stepped closer and stopped when the air between them warmed enough to feel on skin. The wolf inside him lifted its head and watched through his eyes. He did not lower his voice because a low voice would make this attack masquerade as comfort, and he refused to do that to either of them. What are you? She stared at him, then past him as if seeing something over his shoulder that only existed in memory. When her eyes returned to his, they had steadied. Not a curse, and the thought came. Not a weapon by choice. A door the moon forgot to close. He should have scoffed. He didn't. The words landed with the shape of truth, if not the language of it. He held her gaze and pressed once more, not with hands, with the will he used to make a hall of listening wolves stay silent long enough for sense to win. Name it. Her breath lifted. The thread tightened until it felt like a wire. She didn't look away. Fate. The word didn't thud to the floor like a theatrical pronouncement. It rang, quiet and exact, the way steel sings when it's tapped against another piece of steel. It moved through him with a chill, washing the heat of the wolf back a step. Varros bristled at it and then stilled, listening, a growl leashed by curiosity. The pack thread rippled far away and irrelevant for a heartbeat, then near as a whisper. Eamon's mind brushed the edge of Dominic's not with a report, with a habit. He tuned it out without cutting it. Eyes on the girl who had just named the thing he had spent years refusing to believe in any room outside a church of blood and winter. Fate, he repeated quiet. Her chin lifted that fraction again, the one that said choice. He almost asked if she wanted to live. He almost laughed at himself with no humor in it. You know what that word means here, he said. It means the goddess has a plan and we bow to it or break. It means the things I built with my hands can be undone by something I can't wrestle to the ground. It means you have a choice anyway. He let a breath go, slow enough not to look like surrender. Show me the place in that vision where choice lives. Her eyes closed a moment. When they opened, the room thinned again. He didn't fall into the image this time. He hovered at its edge and watched the corridor of his own keep tilt into panic, torches guttering, the flash of that ring, the line of the blade. He felt her thought touch the center of the moment, not to push him, to circle it with light. You reach for trust, the thread carried, or you reach for control. One keeps you breathing, one keeps you alone. He tore free before the weight of it took his knees, hands braced on the table hard enough to make wood creak. The fire popped. Reality returned with the smell of smoke and salve and cold leaking from the window crack. Varus pressed up, heat forcing the vision's chill back. Keep. He straightened. He realized his hands had flattened the map he'd left folded, as if he'd dragged the habit of gripping plans hard enough to bruise into this room without permission. He eased his fingers and found her watching his mouth, as if waiting for a verdict he had no right to deliver. The pack link tugged again, a small insistent pull from the west. Not alarm, a question. He held it off the way a father holds off a child's tug at his sleeve while looking a stranger in the eye. You give me knives and call them doors, he said. You lead a pack in winter, came back. You know how to choose which to open. He almost told her she didn't know him well enough to throw that line. He didn't, because the part of him that had walked men into blizzards and out again recognized the shape of what she'd set down between them. It wasn't arrogance. It was a kind of trust he wasn't sure she even meant to offer. The link tugged harder. He opened it a sliver. Eamon again. Steady. Tracks on the far bank, small, not ours, maybe Fox, maybe a scout that doesn't know how to cover boots. Hold. No engagement. Wake me if the wind changes, and wind steady from the north. Quiet as bone. He closed the line. He stepped close enough to feel the warmth from Thalia's skin as actual heat on his hands, and let himself stop fighting the need to feel that anchor just long enough to learn something he didn't want to need. You will not hold visions alone, he said. If they press, you come to me. If they come through me, I will not run from them. A small nod, quick as if agreeing hurt less if finished fast. You will not let the pack scent fear on you, he added. They'll test a weak seam until it rips. If anyone looks at you too hard, you look back. She did it then. She lifted her chin and met his eyes without blinking. The thread hummed once, a note that felt like iron finding its shape under a hammer. He took a step back because if he didn't, Varus would take one forward. The wolf's voice stroked his bones again, quieter now and more dangerous for it. Mine. He reached for the latch and paused with his palm flat to the wood. He could speak orders through oak and stone well enough. He did not. He looked at her a final moment with everything in him braced between two good, ruinous choices. Sleep, he said, voice low. If the night turns, I'll hear it first. She watched him a heartbeat longer. No plea. No gratitude he would have to refuse. Only that steady attention that had begun to feel like a mirror held up where he'd avoided looking. He opened the door and stepped into the hall. The guard's mind ticked to his like a clock striking. Lyra's attention brushed him from 2 corridors away, bright and constant. Eamon's presence on the link held, calm as cold iron. He let all of it fill the space in his skull where the word she had given him rang. He walked slow and even until the thread between his chest and the door behind him pulled thin enough to stop humming. It didn't break. He did not know if he wanted it to. He rounded the corner, and felt the keep breathe around him. Old stone and older laws, and underneath them a new thing weaving itself into the night with the patience of frost. Back in the room, Thalia sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the fire until the flames doubled in her eyes. The word she had given him sat uncomfortably under her ribs, too big to swallow, too sharp to spit out. She closed her eyes and listened. The corridor stayed quiet. The link faded to a low, steady presence that kept the dark from sounding hollow. Sleep came in uneasy drifts. Each time she surfaced, she felt the echo of his pulse, like a footstep down a hall she had not walked yet. Far out on the west, wind brushed the ridge in a way only wolves would notice. Eamon lifted his head and tasted iron. His mind tipped toward the pack thread in reflex, then eased back into stillness. The banner that would test their snow hadn't moved yet. The knife in the corridor hadn't fallen. The night held. For now. Dominic stopped under a narrow slit of window and pressed his hand to the stone. Cold bit skin. The wolf rose one last time, not to demand, to listen. Fate, he said into the quiet, and the word left a taste he could not name. He stood there until he could breathe without thinking about it, then turned back toward the map and the work that would keep his hands from choosing too soon. The choice waited anyway, a door that could be a knife. He did what he had always done when the snow tried to teach him about inevitability. He prepared. He promised the thread he hadn't asked for one thing only. If it breaks, it won't be because I let go. Morning crept in as a pale stripe across the high window and a soft hiss where the last log settled into ash. Thalia lay still and listened to the keep wake. A door somewhere closing gently, boots turning a corner, a quiet murmur through stone that was not sound so much as a feeling. She rose, pulled Lyra's cloak close, and tested her wrists. The salve had turned the rawness into a dull ache. The dress Lyra had left fit better than anything she had worn in years. Someone had shortened the hem while she slept. She cracked the shutter an inch. Winter air slipped in and bit her cheeks. From that narrow view, the courtyard was a moving pattern of wolves and people changing places with the ease of a practiced dance. Two warriors crossed wooden blades, step and counterstep, breath misting. A pair of young wolves tumbled in snow until a stern glance from the wall made them shake off play and trot to their posts. The world outside the window felt tight with purpose, safe, trapped. Boots paused outside her door. The quiet thread of attention thickened for a moment, then settled. Thalia let the shutter fall and turned as the latch lifted. Lyra entered with a tray and a pair of boots dangling from 2 fingers. She set the tray on the table and hooked the boots near the hearth to warm. Eat while it's hot, and these should fit. Thalia took the spoon and let the broth warm her from the inside out. Thyme. Bone. Something that tasted like late summer. Lyra watched long enough to be sure the first mouthful went where it should, then glanced at the door. You're confined to this room for now. Guard outside. If you need me, ask. If you can't ask, look for me. Thalia set the spoon down and met her eyes. A nod. Lyra seemed to read the rest anyway. My key and Dominic's, Lyra added, touching the latch. No one else. Another nod. Lyra tightened the cloak at Thalia's shoulders with a practical tug. I'll come back at midday. When the door closed, the room breathed again. Thalia ate, moved the chair so the light fell exactly where she wanted it, folded the cloak with deliberate care across the back. If she could not choose her door, she could choose her corners. Small choices steadied the parts of her that still rang from the night. Across the stronghold, Dominic stood over the map and did not look at the door he wanted to look at. The pack's hum moved through him like blood. Under it, heavier and more patient, his other pulse paced. Mine. Varos's certainty pressed the inside of Dominic's ribs until his hands curled on instinct. He shook the tension out and pointed at the river line carved into wood. River watch in pairs. No one on the ice unless I call it. Copper road eyes up at first light and last light. If a white-edged banner touches our snow, I want to know before the shaft creaks. A scent traveled down the link. Eamon's attention rose, quick and steady. "And the girl?" Eamon asked, too mild. "She is not your concern," Dominic answered, and the thought that followed did not pass his mouth. "Not yours. Not the Pack's. Mine to decide." Eamon let a small smile touch his mouth and carried Dominic's orders to the gate and the wall with a thought that brushed a dozen minds at once and returned yes from each of them. Chairs scraped, boots moved. Dominic stood alone with the map and the memory of a ring bright in torchlight. He named it to himself again and let the heat of it clear the last shadow from his thoughts. Then he walked the corridor he was pretending not to need. The guard at the far end did not look away from the blank space in front of him, but attention shifted the way a field turns to wind. Dominic rested his palm on the door. Heat came through wood and iron, hearth-warm and steady. Under it, a quieter rhythm, honest as breath. Veros pushed. "Keep." Dominic lifted his hand and left without opening the door. Thalia tried on the boots, warm leather, proper weight. She moved to the window again and watched the drills begin in earnest. Timing, balance, bodies learning when to commit and when to yield. The pattern calmed her. When a young boy trotted past a gray wolf, the wolf nudged him back to center with a gentle shoulder. The boy laughed and kept going. The sound reached her without becoming harsh. For a long blink, it hurt to witness something so easy. The latch clicked. Eamon stood on the threshold with the door barely open, as if the room might bite if given a chance. "Anything you need." Silence gave him nothing to use. His eyes swept the window seam, the boots, the folded cloak, and returned to her face. "You understand the rules." She held his gaze. A nod. "Good. Keep to them." The door closed without a sound. Thalia exhaled and let the room become hers a little more. By the time Lyra returned at midday with bread and tea and a new tin of balm, Thalia had learned the patterns of footsteps in the corridor and could tell who walked by without looking. "Any better?" Lyra asked. Thalia turned her wrist so the light caught the salve's dull shine. A nod. Lyra set fresh linen on the table, glanced at the chair by the window and hid a small smile. "Training in the yard will be good to watch this afternoon. There's a rhythm to it that's worth learning, even from a window." Thalia slid the chair closer to the light. Lyra watched that simple act as if it mattered. Maybe it did. "Wear this under the dress," and Lyra set a thin wool layer on the chair. "It traps heat. I'll send a seamstress in the morning to make things that fit." Thalia touched Lyra's hand in thanks. Lyra answered with a quick warm squeeze and left the room brighter than when she came. Drills flowed into the afternoon like a river. Pairs turned into quads. Quads into a long line that broke and braided and broke again. Thalia studied how the pack moved as one without losing its separate bodies. She tracked the way glances carried meaning without words. When a scuffle near the wall turned into laughter, and then back into work, she felt the current that kept raw strength inside rules. A presence tugged at the edge of her attention. Not the pack's thread, something outside it. She didn't know how she knew to look, only that she did. Dominic stood in the shadow just inside the yard wall, an unmoving point in a shifting scene. No one looked directly at him, but everything adjusted itself to his presence. The drills sharpened. The line straightened. He watched with the stillness of a predator saving motion for the moments that mattered. His eyes lifted a fraction and found the high window. Not a full look, a recognition. Heat rose under Thalia's skin, as if the cold draft through the shutter had changed to breath. She did not drop her gaze. The held look lasted a heartbeat longer than it should and then ended. He spoke to the warrior nearest him. The warrior nodded and merged back into the flow. Veros rose in Dominic like a tide lifting through rock. The wolf's word moved through him without mercy. Mine. Dominic refused to let breath or shoulders change under it. He did not go to the door. He walked the yard instead, checked a hinge with his fingertips, tested a gate chain's slack, corrected a stance with a palm on a shoulder. He left no trace of the storm moving through him except in the precision of the orders he carried down the link. Rotate the west post now, not at bell. Reinforce the latch on the northern service door. If there's a question about the river ice, choose the long path. Ascent came back clean. The weight in his ribs didn't lift. He left the yard like water, leaving a mark on stone, and climbed the stair to the east corridor because refusing to look had become its own kind of attention. He didn't touch the door at once. He stood just out of sight of the guard and made his breath even. Then he lifted the latch and entered. Thalia stood by the window with the thin wool layer in her hands. Sunlight laid a pale bar across the table. The boots sat warming by the hearth. She had bared her feet again, as if some part of her needed to feel the rug's weave to remember that the ground held. He stopped near the table. Silence rolled between them and filled the corners as if it were a presence that liked rooms. "You know the rules," he said. She nodded. "You are safe because of them." Another nod. "If you test them, wolves will answer before I do." Her chin lifted. It was not challenge so much as a declaration that there was a spine beneath the cloak. He felt his chest answer that small motion, with a rhythm he did not want to measure. "Food at sundown, a seamstress in the morning, you'll have clothes that fit." Her glance flicked to the cloak and back. He almost let the smile come and strangled it for the pack's sake. "You won't need it soon." The thread between them tightened, not with words, with the awareness that a few steps would make too many things too simple. Varos pressed up again, quiet and relentless. "Keep." Dominic changed the texture of the moment before it could change him. "When you need something, ask Lyra. If you cannot ask, wait. No one else opens this door." A pause. He watched her weigh that truth. Waiting had been the shape of her life. He read the understanding in her eyes and hated how easily it moved him. He put a hand on the latch and held it there without opening. "I'll decide your next steps before night." He stepped into the corridor and closed the door, sending the order through the link at the same time. "No one touches this latch. Mind link for orders only. If anything smells wrong, lock the hall and pull me through the thread." Answers returned in the efficient chorus he had built his life around. He walked away with control arranged around him like armor and did not feel any safer. Thalia sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the door for a long breath, then another. The pull at the edge of her awareness had a direction now. It reached to the corner, down the stairs, along a hall, through a room full of ink and carved ridges. It stopped where he stopped and resumed when he moved. The sensation made her chest feel too small. She stood and ran warm water into the basin, pressed a cloth to her face, and let heat loosen the knots sleep had not reached. By the time dusk took hold, the yard had gone quiet and the keep had pulled in tight the way bodies do when cold gets serious. Snow began again, a fine, steady dust that turned torch halos soft. Lyra brought a small basket with fruit and a knit layer to wear under the dress. "Your skin will make peace with our air," Lyra said. "This will help until it does." Thalia lifted an apple and breathed in autumn. She looked at Lyra and tried to put the thanks in her eyes. Lyra's mouth softened. "He keeps his distance when he's afraid of the thing in front of him. Don't mistake space for indifference." Thalia did not know what to do with that line, so she put it on the shelf with the salve and the folded cloth. Lyra touched her forehead to Thalia's for a heartbeat. A brief, sure press that felt like being counted, then left. Night deepened. The keep's hum changed register as posts switched and the west watch stiffened to meet the wind. Thalia set her back to the chair and warmed her feet by the hearth. The door did not open. The pull at the edge of her attention rose and fell like a tide, coming close and easing away, respectful of the last inch of distance as if the air itself had learned to stand guard. Dominic walked the wall until stars looked close enough to touch. Reports touched his mind and passed on. Ronan's name did not cross the thread. The copper road held its silence. Under all of it, the wolf paced. Mine. He could end the ache with a mark and one decision. He could ruin everything with the same motion. He chose the cold between those truths, and kept walking. When he reached the east corridor again, he stood at the corner and let the warmth leaking under the door steady him. He did not lift the latch. He let restraint count as a choice and left the hall to the guard and the hour. In the small room, Thalia blew out the candle and let firelight do the rest. She lay facing the door and breathed until the numbers lost meaning. Sleep came in small boats. Between them she felt the steady answer from somewhere else in the keep, a matched beat that had not asked her permission and did not seem to need it. The night held. The door stayed shut. The bond did not speak. And yet the pull threaded through the hours like a line laid across dark water, sure and quiet, waiting for morning. Night pressed close to the keep until the stones seemed to hold their breath. Thalia drifted between sleep and the listening that had kept her alive for years, the kind that hears what rooms mean, not what they say. The fire tucked itself low. Snow tapped once at the narrow window and slid away. Somewhere in the west a post changed. The thread of mines tightened for a beat, then smoothed like fabric pulled true. The pull at the edge of her awareness gathered again, gentle and insistent. It wasn't sound. It wasn't scent. It was proximity made into a feeling, a tide touching the same strip of shore, and then receding without taking anything with it. She knew he stood in the corridor before the latch moved. Heat rose under the door, a soft exhale of air that wasn't the hearth's. The handle turned. The door eased inward a hand's span and then a man's width. He entered without armor or escort, quiet as if quiet were a skill. The room changed weight around him. He closed the door and did not move at once, as if he were giving his presence time to fit the space, or giving the space time to learn him. Thalia pushed herself up on one elbow. He stood near the fire, not between her and the door, and not blocking the window. The posture of someone who makes it clear he doesn't need to corner what he could catch. Awake. She sat. The blanket slid to her lap. She wrapped her fingers in its edge because they needed something to hold that wasn't him. He stayed where he was and let the quiet do its work. He could have filled it with orders. He didn't. The restraint told her more than noise would have. The thread slid into place so smoothly she didn't realize she had reached for it until it hummed. You came back. He tipped his head a fraction, listening not with his ears. The wolf inside him rose and pressed forward like a shadow stepping into firelight. Heat pushed under his sternum. The bond answered with its own small warmth. I told myself I was checking locks. You don't lie well when the room is this quiet. He almost smiled, a small flash that tightened the skin near his scar. It was gone as soon as it formed. He looked at the hearth like a man measuring a thing that won't hold its shape, and then let his attention return to her. What happened to your voice? And the question slid over an old wound. She didn't reach for it. She touched its edge with the bare minimum of pressure so it wouldn't open. It did not follow me out of childhood. A pause. His intent brushed the surface of the memory, curious, then drew back, without pushing. That small discipline surprised her more than the question had. The pack thinks you were born wrong. The pack thinks many things. Most of them are useful to the pack. He accepted that and moved on. He was good at that, choosing the ground that mattered and leaving the rest untrampled. His gaze shifted, not predatory, not soft, attentive in a way that made her skin feel too small. You reached me in the night. It isn't always like this. What is it like? Weather. It gathers. It breaks. Sometimes I can turn my face out of the wind. Then sometimes it takes you with it. Yes. He came closer, not enough to touch, enough to make the heat a thing felt on skin instead of in the air. He didn't look at her throat. He didn't need to for Veros to lift inside him and fix there with unblinking focus. Mine. The word lived without sound in the space between his ribs. It pushed up into the bond, and Thalia felt it like a warm palm set over a racing heart. She didn't flinch. She did the opposite. She went very still. The stillness was not fear. It was the movement that keeps a skittish animal from bolting. He drew a breath and let it go through his teeth so it didn't become something else. The wolf eased a fraction and paced under his skin, patient and relentless. You showed me more than weather. It forced itself through, and he took that like a report from a trusted scout, noted, placed, not dismissed. He stopped at arm's length and lowered into a chair that set him slightly below her eyeline. A small concession that would have looked like nothing to anyone watching and felt like a door opening to the person it was for. Tell me what you feel just before it comes, a cold first. Then a sound repeating, then something I recognize and can't name fast enough. If I try to force it, it hurts. If you don't, it costs me anyway. He understood costs. He was made of them. The bond took the knowledge from him and laid it where she could see it without words. Winter miles walked so other feet didn't have to. Wounds paid for with silence. So the pack's noise could be victory instead of grief. She didn't look away from him while that understanding moved through. He didn't hide from being seen. The vision had begun to gather in the background the moment he opened the door, faint as light under ice. It pushed now, like a pressure front building. Thalia breathed to make room for it, palms flat on the blanket, eyes on his. He didn't reach for her. He anchored himself by the chair arms and by the way the wolf's weight pressed against bone. Let it come. The room tilted. The fire's breath thinned and reddened as if the air had been drawn away. The stone underfoot remembered snow. Torches along a corridor guttered and flared. Boots hammered, then slipped. A blade came low and true, aimed under the ribs by a hand that knew him too well. A ring flashed once on that hand, small and familiar. Thalia heard the mind thread shatter in the vision like ice struck with iron. Wolves howled. The sound cut in the middle, not finished, as if a throat had been taken out while the note still lived. Dominic's body absorbed the blow of remembering and not dying of it. He didn't move, but the muscles along his shoulders hardened under his coat. His jaw set until the scar pulled. He had the terrible discipline not to tear free, not to reject the picture because it refused to match the shape he wanted the world to hold. The vision shifted to the door inside the vision, the part that was not fixed. Thalia held that door up where he could see it. Two choices lay on either side, ordinary and lethal because of who he was and what the pack was. Trust, control. He looked into both and hated the necessity. He had built a life on making doors into decisions other men could live with. He had trained himself to believe that control was the only thing that let love survive. The vision set that belief down and asked him to pay for it with his own blood. Enough. She let it dissolve the second the word formed in his chest. The fire returned. The air came back with the bite of winter and the sweetness of balm. Thalia's hands trembled once and steadied. He sat back as if a weight had been put down on him and was still there. He stood. The chair creaked. He paced once, then again, a slow loop from hearth to door to window. He did not go near the bed. Veros tracked him inside his skin. A hunter matching a body for patience because patience was the only leash that would hold. He stopped and faced her, the quiet of command sitting in his frame the way snow sits on a branch that has learned not to break. You're not trying to hurt me with this. No, you are not bait. No. Then what are you? She could have given him names the village had used and the wolves would use if given the chance. Burden, omen, debt. She let them pass. She touched the thing under them instead. Warning. And hinge. His gaze didn't move, but the bond let her feel the way the word hinge caught in him, precise and useful, and heavy enough to respect. He came closer, until the heat of him cut the night's chill to something her skin remembered from afternoons before winter. He didn't reach for her wrists. He had seen enough rope in his life to know that touching a bruise can feel like tying a knot. He lifted a hand and let it hover near her cheek, a touch without contact, and the thread hummed as if the air itself were nerve. The wolf rose, quiet and absolute. Mine. Dominic closed his hand and lowered it. The movement cost him. The cost wrote itself along his jaw and across the back of his neck in tight, clean lines. He stepped back because not stepping back would have divided him right there in the firelight. You feel alone? The thought wasn't a question. It came out of her as a simple piece of weather. Cold, where the sun doesn't reach. He didn't deny it. He had been alpha long enough to know that denial wastes heat better spent surviving. Not always. When the pack answers like a single animal. When Lyra laughs and doesn't hide it. When the snow holds so wolves can run where water would take them. And when the door warmed under your palm last night and his breath altered. It wasn't enough to see, it was enough to feel through the link. A truth he hadn't planned to tell himself met him and stood its ground. He met it back with the only thing he trusted more than control. Honesty used like a weapon, never like a gift. Yes. The answer landed softly and changed the room more than a shout would have. Thalia's fingers loosened on the blanket. Warmth climbed her forearms like a slow pour. The sense of being counted, without being measured for what could be taken, settled in the space where fear had lived all day. The bond tightened. It might have been a cord around two wrists. It felt like breath shared under cold. He took one step that was not strategy. It was need. He stopped close enough that the edge of his coat brushed the blanket. He looked at her mouth and not at her throat because looking at a throat would end badly for both of them, and he knew it. The wolf watched through his eyes and aligned breath with hers. Mine. She didn't lean away. She didn't lean in. She held the line between choices without falling off it. He lifted his hand again, slower, and this time he let his knuckles touch the curve of her cheek. Heat sparked at the point of contact and ran down his arm like a wire set to a battery. He could have taken her mouth without asking. He could have set teeth to skin and closed the distance between what he was and what the wolf wanted. He didn't. He lowered his hand and let the ache stand. He turned his head slightly as if listening, and she felt the pack thread touch him and release. West is quiet. Yes. Eamon watching. As ordered. The ring in the vision burned at the edge of both their thoughts. He did not pull the name into the room. He would handle that in daylight with witnesses and a map between him and the knife in his imagination. He returned his attention to the only danger he wanted at the moment. You don't flinch when I come near. Flinching wastes energy. I save it for running. You won't run. If you leave this pack, the link breaks. If you break it, you'll smell like rogue to every wolf within 20 miles. I know what I would smell like. Do you know what you would be to me? The quiet caught on that line. It wasn't a trap. It was a truth laid bare between two people who had stopped pretending that anything about tonight was ordinary. She held his eyes and let him answer himself. A risk I will take anyway. He wanted to say it out loud. The bond carried it for him, stripped of pride and dressed in iron. She felt the weight of it and almost smiled, a ghost of warmth that touched her eyes and made the years of hunger in her look less like emptiness and more like space made ready for something. He reached finally for her wrist, not the part that hurt, the inside where skin is thin and pulses tell the truth. His thumb found the beat there and matched it without trying. The wolf pressed, patient and absolute. Mark. He closed his eyes because the word filled his skull to the edges of pain. He could feel the exact angle his mouth would take to reach the place where claiming lives. He could feel the clean line of her breath when shock turned to heat. He could feel the pack link change shape if he did it, widening to include a new voice that would answer when he called and would hear him in sleep. He could also feel the map catching fire, and the ring glinting and the knife coming low under his guard because a man with a mate has a throat to cut. He let her wrist go with a care that made letting go feel like an act of protection instead of refusal. He stepped back, and the bond burned for a beat like a rope scored across skin before it eased. Why? Because I would do it for me, not for you, and I won't. The answer landed clean and hard. She understood it the way a body understands the difference between falling and kneeling. Her breath left her in a quiet rush she couldn't have put words to even if she had them. He moved away from the bed to the edge of the hearth and let the heat from the stone take the worst of the winter in his bones. He stood there until his heart slowed to something that didn't give the wolf excuses. He looked at her again, and the look wasn't softer. It was steadier. When the vision presses, you will come to me. If it looks like what it looked like tonight, you won't hold it alone. Yes. You will not walk past a guard. You will not open a window. You will not go to the yard without Lyra or me. If anyone reaches for you with the link and it isn't my mind or hers, you will ignore it. Yes, if anyone touches this latch without a key, you will call me, not with your mouth. Yes. He listened for the raw edge of fear in her answer and heard resolve instead. It settled something in him that orders had not. He inclined his head in acknowledgement of a pact that did not need a ritual, then turned toward the door. He didn't open it. He stood with his palm on the wood again, stubborn with himself and careful with her. The guard outside shifted a fraction and went still, hearing the movement without moving. The pack's hum lifted toward the west and evened out. The night made room for what came next. He spoke out loud for the first time since he entered because some things needed air to weigh what they were worth. Sleep. Her fingers tightened once in the blanket and eased. He let the latch go and stepped into the corridor. The door closed. Warmth pressed through the wood into his palm for a heartbeat, as if the room had leaned to meet his hand on purpose. He took that with him to the corner and down the stair and into the map room where cold lived and control sat in neat lines. Behind the door, Thalia lay back and stared at the rafters until her eyes blurred. The bond hummed low, a line across dark water between 2 points that had not existed in the same world yesterday. She let it be what it was without asking it for more. Sleep came in careful increments. Each time she surfaced, she felt the answer to her pulse from somewhere else in the keep. Steady as a promise and just as dangerous. She turned toward it and away from the window and let the night hold. The night held, thin and treacherous as ice over running water. Dominic stood in the map room with his hands braced on the table and tried to convince his body that a plan could be a blanket thick enough to sleep under. Wind nosed at the arrow slits. The lantern's flame bent and steadied. Varos paced a slow, grinding circle inside his ribs and wore patience down to a shine. Mine. He closed his eyes and let the word hit, then break. He had done this for years. Take a force meant to move him and choose the angle at which it slid off. Tonight it did not slide. It lodged, low and hot, as if his bones had learned a new language in a single evening and refused to forget it. He stretched a thin line along the pack thread and reached for the west. Eamon's attention rose at once, a clean shape in the dark. Report. Quiet. Tracks along the far bank that fade before the bridge. Not ours. I'll sweep when the light lifts. Hold, pair the sweep, no one alone on water or stone, understood? Dominic let the line drop. He did not tug on Lyra's mind. She kept her own watch, bright and sure. He waited, and the waiting turned physical, a weight he could not set down until he put it somewhere. He put it in his stride, and took the stairs without noise. The guard at the end of the corridor did not move, but attention tilted toward him like a weather vane catching wind. Dominic didn't make himself touch the door. The warm pressure that came through wood and iron had become too intimate. He stood beside it and let the heat draft around his knuckles, as close as contact, as far as he could afford. The bond lifted between stones like a spring. You're not sleeping. His breath left him with not quite a laugh. You feel that? You make quiet loud. He lifted the latch. The door begged to be opened softly, and he obliged. She was sitting cross-legged on the rug near the hearth, knees under the hem of Lyra's cloak, hair loose and shadowing her face. The flames made small caves of light around her. She looked up, and the room's balance shifted a fraction toward him, as if it had expected his weight and approved of it. He came a step inside and closed the door. You should be angry, her mouth quirked. Should I? I put you in a room and set a guard on the hall. You put me by a fire and told the guard not to think at my door. He didn't want that line and wanted it anyway. He tried for hard ground. We'll mark the seamstress's work at first light and make your clothes fit. The corner of her mouth moved again, almost a smile. He felt it exactly where he shouldn't. He took the chair by the hearth because the bed was a trap and the window asked for a different kind of confession. The heat braced his shins. Varos settled closer to the surface, not calmed, attentive, the way a wolf lies down but keeps his head up. Tell me more about the choice in your vision, and it isn't a word that opens a door. It's a hand. Whose? Yours. You reach and decide which weight to put on it. The bond carried the shape of the moment between options. He saw his own fingers in the vision, the way they flexed before closing over trust or control. He could smell iron and smoke. He knew the dull shock of a blade striking clean. He kept his breath even so she wouldn't pay for remembering. You won't tell me the ring's name, you already know it. He didn't set the name down in this room. It would become a law if he did, and he had enough of those to carry. The wolf pressed again, not for names, for the woman sitting on the rug as if she had grown out of his hearthstones. Mine, keep. He watched how she held herself, straight even when she rested, small but not diminished, tired in the careful way people are who have learned to save the last of themselves for the part of the night where it matters. Nothing about her begged, nothing about her apologized for needing. You could ask for softer walls, a different room. You would still be on the other side of the door. He could have argued he didn't. He looked at the latch and had to put his palm to his thigh to stop his hand going there without permission. He had been in siege cities where hunger wore jewelry, and men turned faith into coins. He had walked home from those places and decided that desire was a tool to use for the pack, never a door to open and step through. He could feel the hinge under his palm just thinking about it. He stood because sitting made him feel like a thing in a cage. He walked the length of the rug and back. The bond slid along with him, not resisting, not leading, keeping pace. You called yourself a hinge, a warning, and a hinge. Hinges are used, doors are used more. You aren't a door to me, he thought, before he caught the line and stopped it from being a promise. Or a lie. She shifted and the blanket reshaped around her knees. Her eyes caught the firelight and held it. If you decide what to do with me, you will do it for the pack first. Yes, and if it breaks me. He halted. The answer required being twice the man he had already promised himself to be. He tested the shape of it before he moved it through the link. If it breaks you, then it was the wrong decision. I don't choose wrong twice. Her breath eased, almost like laughter and almost like grief. Somewhere in the yard, a bell chimed once, muffled by snow. The pack's hum rose and thinned as a post changed. He could have sent a dozen orders to justify standing here. He sent none. She reached for the bond and steadied it, and the steadiness reached back across his chest. It felt like a hand placed there to check the rate and say, "Enough. We can count it now." The wolf lifted a mine. Dominic lowered into a crouch in front of her because he needed to meet the look in her eyes on a level surface. The heat from the hearth found the place on his cheek where the scar tightened when he clenched his jaw. He unclenched it. He did not look at her throat. He kept his eyes on her mouth because it was safer, and not safe at all. You push me and you don't speak. You pushed first. He huffed, not a laugh, a small collapse of breath. He could taste iron at the back of his tongue. He had to ask the question that would either arm him or open him. What are you? Silence held the room like cupped hands. The fire leaned. Outside, the wind rearranged snow at the base of the wall. She didn't look down, didn't look away. The bond tightened, as if the air itself drew a breath to hold while she answered. Fate. The word didn't land with theater. It settled like a key in a lock that had found teeth carved for it long before he was born. He felt the click in his chest and in the place under his tongue that tasted winter, and in the scars on his hands that had learned the shape of rope and blade. Barrow stopped moving and listened the way animals listen when the forest falls silent for a single heartbeat. He should have rejected it. He should have stood and told the night that he made his own map and carved his own roads where rivers went. Instead, he sat with the word and let it lay its weight where it fit too well. The pack thread brushed him with a small, careful question. He ignored it. He built a wall around the word that would let him carry it without bleeding on everyone who touched him. Fate is what people say when they don't have the will to choose. Sometimes. She didn't soften it. Sometimes it is also the name for the thing that will not be moved by will alone. He could give orders in blizzards that would make men walk through white until the world came back. He could put a blade in a throat without noise when silence would save lives. He could pull a pack's minds into one clean line and make it hold under pressure. He could not alter the truth that the bond hummed now, with a frequency that felt like truth recognized, not imposed. He stood so he had something to do with his muscles. The fire threw his shadow high on the wall, a long shape with a cut at the jaw. He wanted something to fight that had edges. He had been handed a word instead. You come into my house as a debt and name yourself with a thing I refuse. You brought me into your house and didn't lock the thread. My thread is mine, and it isn't now. He absorbed that without flinching. It stung anyway. He set his palm to the mantle and watched skin pick up heat. If I accept that word, I accept that the choice in your vision is a trap dressed as honor. It isn't a trap, it's a mirror. He turned back to her, and the look he gave her was the one he gave a warrior, whose life he meant to save by making them angry enough to fight. You are not my ruin, no. You may be the cost of my survival. Yes. The small, clean agreement broke something he had held too tight since before the winter. He didn't hear it crack. He felt stress leave a structure he had believed depended on it. He came forward 2 steps without memory of moving. The bond, warmed like metal held briefly to flame. He reached for her wrist again, not to count pulses, to hold the one place on her body he could touch, without inviting the wolf to make the choice for him. His fingers curved there as if the shape had been made for them. The scent of balm and apple and the faint wild undernote that was not salve and not fruit, and could only be her rose, and settled in the part of his brain that sorts everything into friend and threat and something else, too large to name. Varos pressed, not careless, not frantic, inexorable as snowpack shifting in spring. Mark. He closed his eyes. He could see the angle and the heat and the way the world would become simple for one breath and then complicated beyond repair for the next 1,000. He could imagine the pack thread opening to include her voice. Thin at first, then strong. He could also imagine the ring in torchlight, and the way men sharpen hate on love and call the blade justice. Not now. The wolf bristled and then lay down without baring teeth. The obedience wasn't surrender. It was a choice to wait and a statement of intent. Keep. Dominic opened his eyes. He let her go as carefully as he would lower a blade into a sheath after battle. He knew he had to leave this room before the pull overrode the discipline he had built into his spine since he wore his first scar. He straightened and the world resumed its scale by degrees. He was aware of the weight of his coat again, of the raw place where the wind had chafed the skin under his collar, of the soft burn in his thighs from taking the wall stairs 3 at a time. He was aware of the guard breathing down the hall, and of Lyra's attention moving along the West Watch with the ease of someone who could be trusted to find a threat without drama. He looked at the door and didn't move. If you run, the link breaks. If it breaks, every wolf who scents you will call you rogue. I won't run. You might if I make a choice you hate, and I'll hate you from the same room. The honesty hit like a sweep to the legs he had not seen coming. He adjusted his stance to make space for it. It made him heavier and steadier, not less. You will obey me as long as you are under this roof. Until I learn why I shouldn't, you will learn. He heard the edge in his own thought and took it out. He had meant it as threat. It sounded too much like promise. He went to the door and set his palm flat as if the wood could remind him where the room stopped. The guard's attention leaned forward a fraction, and then reset. The pack thread rose again, small and insistent, pulling from the west. He opened it enough to let the words through and keep the noise out. Aemon, still quiet, the road. Still quiet. He closed the line and turned the latch. He looked at her one last time with the admission he had refused himself since she crossed his border. You are not a curse, no. You are not mercy, no. You are what happens when the moon notices. He didn't wait for agreement. He stepped into the corridor before he could make a decision that would feel right for a breath and wrong for years. The door closed. Warmth pressed through the wood, held him for the space of a count, and let him go. He pulled the pack to attention with a thought that rang along the thread like metal struck clean. West Watch, Titan, River pair, hold the bend. No mines on the east hall. If a scent changes near that door, you call me with your head, not your mouth. A scent washed back, disciplined, layered, loyal. He took the stairs and let the keep's cold, set teeth in his cheeks to remind his body where it belonged. Back inside the room, Thalia lay back on the rug and stared up at the beams until the old knots looked like constellations. The bond hummed, steady and low, not a tug, a line laid with care. She let the word she had given him settle in her own chest and feel heavy there, not as a banner to wave, as a fact. She had learned to survive by never being the center of anything. Tonight, a center had found her and would not be moved. She turned toward the fire and away from the door because the warmth mattered, and the door would not. Sleep came like tide over rocks, in and out, never fully covering, never fully leaving. Each time she surfaced, she felt the answer to her pulse from somewhere else in the keep, and the absence that followed it when he pushed it down to keep the pack from hearing. On the west wall, Eamon lifted his head to the slight shift in the wind and tasted metal. He let his mind brush the thread like a musician testing a string and found it tuned tight. He smiled without showing teeth and went back to watching the line where the dark thickened. The banner hadn't moved. The knife in the corridor hadn't fallen. The choice the vision had shown had inched closer, not with steps, with inevitability. Dominic halted in the passage where a slit of window cut night into a thin square. He set his hand on the stone as if the keep could count his pulse and tell him whether it matched the rhythm of a man in control. It did not. It matched the rhythm of a man who had finally called a thing by its name and learned that the word did not take orders. He let breath out in a long, even line and took it back in. He walked to the map and relit the lantern. Lines and carved ridges and small stones had not moved. He moved them because that was what he could do. He set 2 on the copper road. He set 1 on the river bend. He set 1 in his mind on an east corridor door and pretended it belonged there. The bond hummed through the work like a string under his hand, making every piece vibrate at a pitch he hadn't used before and could no longer pretend he didn't hear. Morning thinned the dark to a pale strip across the high window. The fire muttered low, a watchman finishing his shift. Thalia lay still and listened to the keep move under the hour, footfalls softened by rugs, a door closing far off. The quiet current of minds that made up Bloodfang's thread. Beneath it, close and steady, the hum she had named the night before. Fate. The word sat under her ribs like heat banked in ash. She rose and pulled Lyra's cloak around her shoulders. The dress the seamstress had basted to fit waited on the chair, pins catching the first light. The salve had turned the rope burns to faint pink bands. She flexed her hands and let the ache answer, then quiet. She cracked the shutter. Winter air touched her face and stung. Below, the courtyard moved with morning purpose. 2 wolves crossing shoulder to shoulder, a pair of warriors trotting the wall, steam lifting from a bucket toward the pale sky. No faces tilted up. The absence felt deliberate. Breath paused outside her door. Attention gathered without scrape or whisper, then eased away. She set her palm to the wood. Warmth bled through oak and iron, the heat of bodies and lamps in the hall. The bond hummed a fraction stronger, carrying a sense of motion that didn't belong to boots. The Alpha was awake. The pack leaned toward him the way trees lean toward prevailing wind. Lyra arrived with a tray and a length of wool draped over her arm. She set the food down, tested Thalia's hem with quick fingers, and angled the chair to pull better light. Eat, then I'll finish this before the seamstress climbs the tower. Thalia took the first sip of broth and felt it loosen the night in her ribs. She touched Lyra's wrist. A quiet thank you. You slept, Lyra said, while her needle found the first stitch. Good. He didn't. Thalia watched the small, neat bites of thread disappear into cloth. The room felt warmer just from the sound of work. You'll hear them more today, Lyra went on. Not words. The weight of watching. We keep minds off this door, but walls remember voices after they've gone. Thalia nodded once. She had lived with remembered voices longer than she had lived with kindness. When the latch clicked and Lyra slipped out, silence took its shape again. The keep's thread flowed clean, yet here and there it tugged, thoughtful, curious, testing. A mind reached toward the corridor and struck the line Dominic had set. It snapped back like a hand from flame. No words, only the flavor of them between stones. Why a mute girl sat in the Alpha's rooms, whether a debt had teeth, whether the old stories had finally come to collect. Dominic stood on the parapet with frost in his breath and iron under his palms. The river held still beyond the trees, a dull strip pulled tight between ridges. The copper road kept its secrets. He counted torches and posts, and hinge pins, by habit. The pack's link hummed under the wind. He sent the morning like a blade through cloth. River watch in pairs. No one on ice. Copper road eyes up first and last light. White fringe on a banner, and I want it before the shaft creaks. A scent rose from a dozen minds at once. The shape of Bloodfang answered him the way a hand answers a thought. Eamon's presence lifted at the west with its usual clean line. Ridge is clean. Tracks fade at the birch cut. Traders say Ronan buys lamp oil and patience. Lamp oil and patience. He tucked the words where he kept the small things that start fires. He did not let his shoulders change. Varos paced under his ribs, a heat that refused to become breath. Mine. The word was vow-shaped this morning, not hunger. The wolf had decided. The man ignored it by force and walked the wall. He passed the south turret. Eamon slid into step without noise. Bridge at first light, Eamon sent along the thread. 2 on the near bank, 2 on the far. No one alone. Hold it. Tighten when the wind turns. Switch post early if your eyes sting. Understood. Dominic finished the circuit, touched hinges, counted grain sacks with his nose, found nothing to strike, and hated the way that did not soothe. When he reached the east corridor, the guard's attention tipped and settled. He laid his palm to the door. Warmth came through the wood like a living thing. The bond lifted in answer, steady as a pulse. He removed his hand and refused the temptation to let a door tell him who he was. Thalia watched the yard with her palms flat to the sill. As the drills began, bodies braided and broke and braided again with patient precision. Blunted blades tapped and turned. Falls ended in laughter and a hand up. A mind thread lay under it all, a current that kept the movement one animal, not scattered limbs. It pressed to the east hall and slid away each time it met Dominic's boundary. Discipline lived here, it had teeth. The latch lifted. He entered with the cold riding his coat and the quiet riding his spine. He closed the door, and the air changed weight like water filled a hollow. You will remain here today? She faced him, her chin rose a degree, the bond warmed. The seamstress will fit what you need by night. If the window sticks, leave it. The drop is stone. She glanced toward the narrow opening and back to him. Her mouth didn't move. The thought touched him without breath. I know the shape of falls. He didn't let his face answer. He moved around the table and lifted the basted sleeve and set it down again, the useless gesture of a man who knows cloth won't hold what he once held. He made himself look at her hands. The marks had flattened under balm. Anger came on time, clean, simple, useful. He catalogued it and put it away where it would be sharp when he needed it. No minds at the East Hall, he sent down the link while his eyes stayed on her. Anyone who reaches for this latch without a key will answer to me. The scent ran back like a trained river. Varos rose inside him, no rush, just certainty. Mine. Keep. Dominic kept his voice even. If any wolf tests you with words or looks, ignore it. If any mind pushes at you, turn away from it. Look for Lyra. Or for me. She nodded once. Not obedience for its own sake. Agreement to terms she had chosen to accept. You lack nothing under this roof. Her gaze held. The answer lifted through the bond, steady and sharp. I lack outside. He let it stand. Protection and prison often use the same keys. You name the word, he said. Now it won't leave the room. I didn't make it. I pointed to it, and he moved closer without planning it, stopped with the table between them. The scent of her reached through smoke and pine fat, apple from Lyra's basket, resin from balm, and beneath both a wild note that belonged to neither. The wolf pressed its muzzle into that scent the way a starving animal presses its nose through a fence. There are whispers in the keep, he said. You'll feel them. I know what a whisper weighs. He almost smiled. He did not. The ground between them was thin ice. One wrong shift, and both of them would go through. Ask Lyra for anything you need, he said. If you feel the vision turn toward you, don't hold it alone. That answer took a breath, then a small, sure nod. He set his palm on the door. Warmth met him from the wood, the same warmth his hand had memorized last night. The bond rose. You keep me because of danger. Yes, you keep me because you want to. Yes, you won't mark me today, and no, because of the pack, because of me. He opened the door before the room could change both of them at once. The corridor's cold sobered his skin. The guard did not move. His attention shaped itself more tightly. Dominic drew the pack thread taut and tuned it like a string. West watch, brace for wind at the bend. Dry blankets to tower posts. Save your minds for what needs them. None thrown at the east hall. Yes came layered and loyal. Eamon's focus rose. Light and ready. You keep her there to bait him or bait us, the bait assent, polite as wind. Neither. To protect the pack. From her or for her, for now. The assent that followed sat clean and quiet on the line. Dominic let it go, and wore the stairs down with silence. Thalia stood a long time at the window, learning the cadence of the yard, the hour the smoke thinned, the moment the drills ended, the change in the guards breathing at the far end of the hall, when a bell turned. She moved onto the square of knit Lyra brought and let warmth climb through her shins. Lyra returned with fruit and a second layer, her needle flashing and vanishing while she talked in sentences built like beams. You'll feel the pack testing the edges of this door, she said. They'll do it like wolves do, quick, and then gone. Your job is to be warm and not flinch. Thalia touched the place just above her heart where the hum had settled like a second rhythm. He's worse when he cares, Lyra added. He calls it protection and builds a cage and sits outside it to guard the lock. Don't mistake distance. Thalia didn't. Space had been both luxury and punishment in her life. She made room for gratitude without letting it take over her ribs. Afternoon stretched. The drills gave way to chores. A young wolf trotted past with a basket of kindling in his mouth. An elder leaned on the wall and listened to another's hands tell a story. The pack thread flowed without snagging, yet now and then curiosity flicked and died at the line Dominic had drawn. Thalia felt each touch like a finger drumming the far side of a table. The light slid down the wall. Lyra eased the last pin from the hem and smoothed the seam with her palm. There, she said, walk and it'll walk with you. Thalia moved her arm and felt the difference. No fight from the cloth, no cold sneaking in at the sleeve. Lyra tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, an ordinary gesture that somehow survived a place built for war. Change brushed the keep, not alarm. Interest, narrowing. The wind shifted. Snow lifted off parapets in a soft glitter. The pack leaned west for a beat and then steadied. Thalia went to the window as much to feel the room flex as to see the trees. The latch moved once and stopped. The door opened the width of a hand, closed again. He didn't enter. He didn't need to for the air to mark him. The bond warmed and cooled in a breath, like a palm set briefly against a door and taken away. You will stay, yes. You will not break without telling me. No. Lyra's eyes lifted from her needle as if she felt the same temperature change through the wood. Her mouth shaped two soft words with steel in them. Hold fast, Thalia nodded. The day finished its slow turn. Whispers thickened and thinned. The bond kept its hum, constant as tide. By the time torches opened orange flowers along the wall, and the first deep cold of evening slid its hand under the stone, she had learned the edges of the room and the measure of its mercy. She had learned the sound of the guard's weight shifting and the pace of Dominic's steps on the stair. She had learned she could stand here and not be small. When he came at last, the door obeyed him without protest. He crossed to the table and set a plain knife beside Lyra's basket, a domestic peace offering in a war that had decided to live in his chest. Eat. Sleep. He turned to go. The bond tightened without words. Warmth pushed through the wood into his palm when he put his hand there again, as if the room itself leaned into him for a heartbeat, and then let him go. He left carrying the ache of a choice he still refused to name, and the wolf inside him licked that ache like salt and settled to wait. Night sank into the keep until torches looked like small suns in deep water. The wind pressed a cold palm to the stone and left it there. Thalia sat on the rug Lyra had given her, knees tucked under the dress, the new seam a warm band around her wrists. She watched the fire settle into coals and listened to the house change. Posts turned over with quiet efficiency. Buckets were set down in places that would remember where they belonged by morning. The pack's thread dropped in pitch for the hours when survival means stillness more than speed. The bond held its own hum beneath that, close and even. Fate. The word hadn't gone. It had become a temperature. She breathed with it until her ribs learned the count. Somewhere under the slow, she felt the pull. That meant he was moving closer. It wasn't footsteps. It was the air learning his weight in the corridor before the latch moved. The handle turned. The door eased inward. He entered with the winter still on his coat and the quiet still on his face. The room met him the way a lake meets a body, accepting the shape and changing without complaint. He closed the door with care. The sound was less than a breath. She rose without thinking. Heat climbed her arms as if standing had opened a channel in the air. He stopped by the fire instead of by the bed or the window. That choice told her something, and told his wolf something else. The animal pressed forward inside him with attention sharpened enough to cut. Mine. He let the word move through him and refused to give it orders. He looked at her first, then at the coals, then at the door, as if triangulating a position under threat no one else could see. You're not sleeping, she reached through the bond, neither are you. The truth brushed her skin like warm breath. Another truth pressed under it, heavier and less comfortable. The pack had begun to think around the edges of the door, not disobedience. Curiosity, honed by long winters, and the habit of survival. He had held them off all day by will and law and the quiet fear he carried like a tool. Night loosens even good habits. He leaned a shoulder to the mantel. Heat climbed through stone into the palm he set there. Tell me before it gathers, he said. I won't have it take you by surprise. You'll feel it when I do. He almost pushed a sound into the air and caught it. The bond moved like a hand finding a pulse. He felt her steady under his ribs as if their bodies shared a small piece of machinery. The wolf settled lower at that acknowledgement, not calmed, not idle, watching through his eyes. The first pressure came like weather changing. No image, no word, a shift in balance. Thalia closed her eyes to make room for it. He didn't cross to her. He planted his boots and let it come because fighting that part always cost more than it paid back. Cold arrived first. Not the winter under the window. The cold of stone that has learned blood. Torches along a corridor guttered, then flared high, turning faces into masks and shadows into warnings. Snow lay trampled into slick in the courtyard beyond the arch, streaked with ash from a torch knocked down and kicked back up. The mind thread in the vision howled, loud enough to gain the whole pack at once, the way only an Alpha or Luna can. Then it broke, not silence. The sound a line makes when it snaps under weight, whipping both ends into the dark. Thalia's hands tightened at her sides, but she didn't reach for him. She anchored herself by the rug, and by his look. The vision kept pressing. A figure moved fast and low through torchlight. Not a stranger, not the enemy from the valley. The strike came for the soft place under the ribs the way someone who has sparred with a man for years learns to aim. A ring flashed on the striking hand, small, familiar, bright as a lie told clean. Dominic felt the blade find him with a dull, intimate shock. He did not jerk in this room. He absorbed the memory of it into the muscles along his back and let it burn there. The vision shifted to the choice he hated. 2 doors, 2 weights, trust set in one hand, control in the other. He had built a life on holding both, and making the world believe it could not tell which he would throw first. The vision demanded he choose in front of a knife. It will cost you either way, the bond carried, choose where you bleed. He stayed with it long enough for the air in the room to thin. Then he made the line with his mind that always broke storms where they tried to take him whole. Enough. The picture receded, cold pulling back under the doors it had come through. The torches in this room were only coals again. The snow under his boots was the rug. His heart counted twice, like a misstep, and then found itself. She didn't sit. He didn't either. The quiet removed its weight finger by finger and left something else behind, harder to lift. It was not a foreign hand he sent, not an enemy from the trees. No, it was the hand of someone who knows your stride. Yes, he could have named the ring and the wrist it lived on. The name rose into his mouth and tasted like iron. He let it stay there, and did not let it out. The beta on the west wall kept an honest watch that had never failed him. The wolf inside him would hunt the scent until there was nothing left of the person who wore it. Between those facts lay the part that broke men who wanted clean answers. He moved finally, not closer, not away, a slow step that gave his body something to count. The bond followed. It did not pull. It waited. "You think I brought you this to hurt you?" she sent. Ordinary as stating that winter follows fall. "I think you brought me what was coming whether you wanted to or not." She breathed once, and the breath carried a very old memory across the link, too brief and too tired to be self-pity. A door closed on her voice before she ever learned what it could do. She had learned to carry warnings without witnesses. He felt that truth like a pebble in his boot and did not shake it out. The pack shifted outside the room. Not alarm. The change of a post, the turn of a patrol at the southern path, the murmur of minds confirming the hour to each other the way wolves count noses in the dark. He touched the thread with 2 fingers of thought and let it brush his attention the way a sentry touches his alpha's shoulder without looking. Western ridge clear, Eamon sent, clean as a blade shown and sheathed. River ice holding. I'll sweep the bridge when light turns. Paired. Paired, Dominic returned. Make the sweep slow. Understood. The line lingered in his head a hair too long, like a note played and not damped. He let it fade. He did not turn to face the wolf he could hear drawing conclusions. The animal paced because pacing is what animals do when the dream of a hunt crosses a room that is not a forest. Mine. He didn't pretend he didn't hear it. He took the distance between himself and the woman by the fire and cut it down by half. He didn't touch her. The heat between bodies did the small, cruel kindness his flame does when you lean your hands out to it. She didn't lean in or away. She stood level across from him and let the bond carry the things that would have cracked out loud. You are not unwanted here. The words slid over a place too scarred to take pain and found the softer ground beneath. She felt them there and could not answer with anything elaborate. The mind puts up banners when it has breath to spare. Hers had learned to fold what mattered into compact shapes. Then let me be more than a locked thing. He should have told her that survival and control look the same from a distance for a reason. He should have told her that wolves live longer when their alpha makes rooms into rules. He heard himself instead. I'm trying to keep you alive, and I know it isn't the same as letting me live. The truth found its mark and stayed. He quit the mantle because the heat there had become another kind of pressure. He lowered into the chair by the hearth with the discipline of a man who refuses to pace when pacing would admit something he cannot unsay. She didn't sit. The height put her above him. It didn't threaten. It balanced. Tell me what you felt just before it broke, he sent. The moment before the ring, before the strike. The air changed weight. The pack sounded like wolves thinking in different rooms. The link was still there, but the minds on it were not listening the same way. He tasted the shape of it without needing more words. Disunity. The kind that doesn't start with howls. The kind that begins with small private decisions about which orders deserve precision and which will wait until a warmer day. He reached for the bond and misjudged his restraint. Heat came away on his hand like the sting of a brand, and Varos lifted in him, like a winter moon clearing treetops. Mine. Mark. He could feel it then with humbling clarity, the whole sequence of nerves and muscle and intention that would end at her skin, the press of his mouth to the place where claiming lives, the clean shock of first contact yielding to warmth, the pack thread opening to include a sound that would belong to them and to the house. He could feel the map catching fire a breath later, and the knife in the corridor coming true, and his hands full of a life he had not meant to choose with a war on the steps, and not now. He knew he had thought it, and he knew she had heard it, because the bond went tight as a rope drawn fast over a pulley. The wolf bristled and then lay down with a growl that had nothing to do with surrender. Waiting was still a kind of choice. The animal could keep a promise without speaking. She lowered at last to sit across from him on the knit rug, mirror to his posture in a way that would have made a weaker man imagine he was in control. She rested her palms on her knees. Her breath steadied and found his count. The distance between skin and skin kept its small, decent lie. You don't want me marked because of me, she carried across the space. You don't want me marked because it would make a map of your heart that someone else could read. He didn't blink. He let the line do what lines must do when they are true. Both are real. She turned her head slightly as if listening to a sound behind his shoulder. The mind knows how to make room for two realities when the body doesn't. You don't trust your walls tonight, she said, but I trust them. I don't trust the choices people make when they think a door is about to open that shouldn't. He had kept men loyal with austerity. He had kept them breathing with discipline. He had praised them when praise would build bones and starved them of it, when it would introduce rot. He had taken knives in quiet corners from enemies and looked his friends in the mouth and taught himself not to look away from what teeth can do. The bond warmed once more and then cooled. She did not reach for him with hands. She did the harder thing. She did not reach for him with need. I won't ask you to be weak for me. He looked at her then with a kind of attention he very rarely allowed. The kind that admits witness. The kind that says what you are doing is more dangerous than what I am trying to avoid. You're not a curse, and no. You may be the only warning I get before the knife. He almost put a name on that last word and chose not to. The pack thread brushed his edge, a small, practical inquiry from the West Watch. He let it pass into him and out again like air. He stood because sitting had begun to feel like the first step in falling. The chair scraped quietly against wood. He crossed the distance between them with two controlled strides and stopped, with heat sliding off his coat and reaching her. He lifted a hand and let his knuckles whisper along her cheekbone. He watched her eyes, not her throat. If he looked at her throat, the wolf would tighten, and there would be nothing left in the room but teeth and vows. He touched her wrist next, the inside where blood tells the truth. Her pulse met his thumb, and chose to match him for the space of a few beats as if it had been practicing. He measured it in silence. He let himself learn that. Count the way he once learned the rhythm of the river to build a crossing at the narrowest place. When he could hear nothing but that shared sound, he released her carefully as if letting go were a thing that could bruise if done without patience. If the vision presses again, he sent, you call me where I can answer at once. Not words through a door. Here came back steady, not a plea, not a bargain. An agreement that carried more weight than either of them wanted to admit. The pack shifted in the hallway beyond the guard. He felt it through stone and thread. A young wolf changed feet, tired more than careless. An older one laid a thought across the link that asked nothing and gave acknowledgement. This watch, this hour, this breath, I am where I said I would be. The discipline steadied him more than the fire did. He went to the door because leaving is also a muscle that needs practice. He put his palm to the wood and waited until the warmth under it offset the cold walking through the rest of the keep. He turned the latch and stopped with the door an inch open because she reached for him with a thought that didn't line up with any of the questions he had been prepared to answer. You are afraid of me, no. You are afraid of what you will do because of me. Yes. The honesty cleared something behind his eyes like a wind that takes smoke out the proper hole. He stood there and let it. The guard's breath didn't change. The pack's hum didn't waver. Only the line between his chest and the room shifted into a shape that would be harder to lie to in the morning. He stepped into the corridor. He closed the door without noise. The warmth pressed into his palm through wood for a long second, and then let go. He pulled the pack thread taut and sent orders the way he had taught himself to send them when his voice should stay out of the air. West watch, sweep in pairs, river hold. No mines cast toward the east tower. If a scent near that door turns wrong, you call me with your head, not your mouth. Yes returned in layers, the clean assent of wolves who knew their work and liked it. One answer brushed his thought with the old closeness that made a man think family and mean competence. He set it down where he set risk and kept walking. Back inside, Thalia stayed on the rug until her legs remembered rest. The fire cracked once as if the room had thoughts about what they had almost done and chose not to share them. She lay back and watched the shadow beams cross the ceiling until they stopped looking like bars and started looking like the bare bones of a house. The bond hummed soft and steady. She let it. She did not ask it to be more. She had learned to survive by refusing to beg anything that did not have breath. This had breath. This had a heartbeat. She closed her eyes and let the line draw a small, bright path between 2 points in the dark. Dominic stopped at the narrow window in the pass between towers and set his hand against stone the way a man checks the strength of a horse before crossing thin ice. The night pressed close and ordinary, the kind of cold that kills the unprepared and leaves the disciplined alone. He counted that as mercy, and then took it away from himself again. He went to the map and lit the lantern and put a small stone at the river bend, and another on the copper road, and a third nowhere at all, just beside the edge of the table where only he would notice its weight. He knew exactly where that one belonged. He refused it a place. The wolf settled, not satisfied, resolved. Mine. Keep. He let the word live in him without moving it toward action. He could hold heat. He had stretched that skill over winters and wars. The trouble now wasn't heat. It was the fact that holding that word had begun to feel like holding breath. He blew air out in a long line and took more in. The thread of the pack hummed back a steady answer like a pulse in a wrist. The bond hummed lower. Private. A second rhythm. He stood between them. A man with 2 hands on different ropes, and did what leaders do when nothing else can be done at this hour. He waited. The hour before dawn pressed against the keep like a second wall. Dominic stood in the narrow pass between towers, where the cold came clean and honest. Wind combed the pines. The lantern in his hand threw a tight circle on stone, and left the rest tonight. Varos prowled the length of his ribs, nose lifted to a scent that wasn't air. Mine. He closed his eyes. The word hit and didn't move on. He didn't bother to argue with it. He had learned early that denying an animal makes it louder. He steadied breath, found the pack thread with 2 fingers of thought, and drew it taut. West. Eamon's attention rose at once, secure as a grip you don't have to test. Ridge clear, bridge holding, pair at first light. Hold no one alone and understood. The line lingered a fraction before receding. Familiar warmth edged the back of Dominic's tongue, and the vision's ring flashed in memory with a precision that felt like fresh snow underfoot. Unmarked. Varos's growl curled around the image without making a sound. He turned from the slit of window, set the lantern aside, and took the stairs to the east corridor without letting the decision dress itself in pretense. He could have given it a dozen names: inspection, duty, discipline. It was none of those. It was the bond humming at the edge of thought until he chose to answer. The guard squared without moving when Dominic rounded the corner. No mines pressed at the door. He would have felt them. Still, the corridor carried the weight of held questions. He pushed a measured assurance through the link, a hand on a row of shoulders. Hold your posts. Quiet minds. The hall eased. He set his palm to the wood and felt warmth climb into his skin, as if the door breathed. He lifted the latch. Thalia was awake, back to the hearth, knees drawn up on the knit rug Lyra had insisted upon. The half-fitted dress lay folded on the chair, neat and waiting. Her eyes found him, and the room came into focus, as if his presence had pulled the edges in. The bond answered with the small, treacherous relief he had begun to hate because it felt like permission. He closed the door. No other noise moved. "What are you?" The question carried the weight of a command given on a battlefield, not because he meant to crush her with it, because he needed an answer that would hold. Silence settled. Then, without breath, the bond brought it clean. Fate. He'd expected deflection, he got iron, he tried to make anger of it. It didn't take. Anger is simple. This was something else. It lifted old instincts and asked them to kneel. You tether yourself to a word and ask me to arrange a life around it. You tether yourself to a pack and ask the world to obey. He almost smiled. He didn't. Veros pressed, patient and exacting. Mark. Dominic stood where he was and refused to move on that axis. He wanted something he could wrestle and make obey through force. He had a woman who met him with quiet, and a thread he could not sever without cutting himself. He drew a breath and changed ground. You think I hide you because I'm ashamed. You hide me because you want me safe, and because you want me near. Truth landed without theatrics. He did not dignify it by denying it. Wolves whisper in my house. They did long before I arrived. He took 2 steps that decreased distance without ending danger, and the air warmed between them. The wolf lifted its head inside him, like an animal at the lip of a stream. He looked down at her bare feet on the knit, the fringe like a small winter field. She had claimed the square as a country. He could see it in the set of her shoulders. She would not be small to be safe. He had spent his life trying to make his wolves both. You think you can push me out of cold with a word, he said. No, I think you can choose to leave it. He moved again because stillness had begun to feel like surrender. The chair by the hearth caught him. He sat because sitting turned the need to reach into the discipline of waiting. She didn't sit. The height gave her the small advantage of looking down on him without lordship. The bond hummed between them like a line tuned to a pitch only 2 bodies could hear. Why do the visions come through you, he asked. Why now? Because you finally opened a door I could reach. He accepted the blow. He had brought her into the house for a reason he pretended was singular, and now had to live with the plural it became. You came with a debt, he said. You are not a debt anymore. What am I? He could have answered with the wolf's word, mine. He didn't. He set his mind to the only answer that would not rot him later. A warning I will use to save what I can. Her gaze didn't flinch. Use me for the right thing. He stood in one motion, heat lifting with him, the room changing scale to fit. He closed the space until his coat brushed the edge of the blanket and stopped. He lifted his hand and let his knuckles touch her cheek. It wasn't tenderness, it was the only contact he could allow that did not invite his teeth. She leaned into it, not at all, and not away. That refusal to bargain with need pulled a curse from his bones. He did not give breath. You can chain my body, the bond carried cool and steady. You cannot chain my spirit. The words hit a seam he'd hammered straight in himself for years. Veros moved fast at that, not to attack, to align. The wolf recognized the truth of it the way animals recognize water. Dominic lowered his hand and stepped back because if he didn't, the next motion would be a mark. The pack stirred outside the room. Attention shifted toward the tower and back, the way a flock's shadow passes over a field and leaves it unchanged but not unfelt. He pulled the thread and spoke into it with the low certainty that made minds obey. East Hall remains closed. Any wolf who tests that line will answer to me. A scent hummed back, layered and tight. Under it, a smaller current. The kind of curiosity that grows teeth if fed. He sent discipline along the same path like a cold wind pinching flames flat. Eamon's presence rose with professional ease. No friction at the edges. He didn't ask with his mouth. He placed a simple thought where anyone on the link could feel it. You want pressure off the tower, I'll pull it west. A sweep now will keep noses busy. Do it, pairs only. The line smoothed. The corridor eased. Dominic let the room come back to its smaller scale and found Thalia watching him not like prey watches a hunter, like a soldier watches weather, noting patterns ready to move when the wind made up its mind. You are not simple, he said. Neither are you. Then hear me as one complicated thing to another. If you walk out of this roof, the link between you and any of mine will break, and the scent it leaves on you will make every wolf within miles call you rogue. I know. Know this too. He let the mind voice drop lower. If you leave now, I will come after you. Not because I own you, because the knife you carry will follow, and I would rather it finds my throat than yours. The bond jolted, not with fear, with the shock of being seen in a place she did not expect to be seen. He hadn't known he would say it until he said it. Lyra's voice moved along a thin personal line then, a light brush at the edge of his thought. The way family knocks on a door they've always had a key to. At the west. Wind shifted. I'll keep the eyes. Don't pick a fight you don't mean to win. He let a breath out and shaped an answer that would not set fire to anything. Hold them. Always. He stepped past Thalia toward the door and then stopped because leaving now would make the conversation a law he might not be able to live under tomorrow. He turned back. What did you mean when you called yourself fate? He asked, flat as a blade on a whetstone. Why me? Because you built a house so strong it forgot the sky? Because a pack needs more than iron to live? Because the knife is coming, and you would take it alone if I let you? He wanted to throw the chair against the wall just to watch something break that wasn't a person. He didn't. He went still in the dangerous way that makes wolves lower their heads and wait. The wolf quieted, not calmed. Waiting is a skill, not a piece. Tell me the last piece, he said. Tell me why I fear you. She didn't move. She didn't breathe for a count. The bond drew itself thin as wire and then softened into a whisper that found the rawest place and didn't miss. You fear me because you already know I am the end of you. The words did not gloat. They did not promise ruin like a banner. They laid a hand on the truth and left it there. He took a step back because balance demanded it. His mouth tasted of iron. Heat and cold both walked his spine. Vero surged up with a sound he refused to put in his throat. Not a snarl. A vow. Keep. He could have ended everything in the room with one choice. He could have saved nothing and called it protection with the same choice. He stood between those doors and did what had made his wolves follow him this far. He chose to wait. He put his palm to the door, felt the warmth push against his skin like breath trying to talk sense into a man determined to do without. He turned the latch. He didn't leave. He opened the bond one more time and let honesty go through it without armor. You are not a curse, you are not mercy, you are the line I cannot cross without becoming something I won't recognize. Then don't cross, stand on it with me. He left because leaving was the only discipline left to him. The corridor's cold took his face in both hands. The guard's attention clicked tight. Questions moved in the house like fish under ice and did not break the surface. He pulled the pack thread hard enough to make it sing and laid orders on it like weights set on canvas against wind. West sweep now. Pairs on the ridge. River hold. No mines cast toward the east. If a scent changes near that door, pull me with your head, not with your mouth. Yes rolled back from a dozen throats clean and sure. Amon's ascent rode above them, balanced as always. Dominic let the keep stand on its legs and trusted it, because trusting it was the only way to live here. Back in the room, Thalia let her knees loosen and sat again on the rug. The fire shifted and made a small sound like a held breath letting go. She stared at the line of light under the door until it stopped shaking. The bond hummed in her chest, a second heartbeat laid against her own. She hadn't meant to throw the last sentence like a stone. It had gone because it had weight. It had landed because he had no place to put it down. Lyra tapped once and entered without waiting for permission she didn't need. She took in the room with one practiced sweep and set a folded blanket near the chair. Cold crept in, Lyra said. Use this. Thalia nodded. Lyra studied her the way a healer studies a wound that isn't bleeding but will ache in the snow. Her eyes warmed and steeled in the same breath. He will break himself before he breaks you, that's the danger. Thalia looked at the door. The bond was a low line in her chest. Lyra followed the look and gave the smallest, fiercest smile a sister ever gave a brother's worst habit. Hold fast, she said. She left the door warmer than she found it. Dawn put gray fingertips on the window. The keep turned in its sleep and began to wake. Dominic stood at the map with the lantern low and the stones placed. River, road, ridge. He put a fourth nowhere on the board and let his hand hover above it without setting it down. He could feel Varos under him, not content, not raging, waiting. It made his bones feel like a bridge under spring ice. He straightened and breathed in the smell of smoke and iron and wool and apple that still clung to his hand. He put his palm on the table because there was no door here to warm him, and no pulse he could risk counting and still be himself in front of his pack. The bond hummed, steady and inescapable. He did not kill. He did not claim. He did not let go. He drew the keep around him with orders and the patience of a man who understands that sometimes the choice is not what to do, but how long you can stand on a line before it cuts. Morning tightened the keep like a belt. Cold bit through stone and whispers had grown teeth. Thalia woke to the mind thread of Bloodfang dragging low, not broken, strained. The bond in her chest answered with a steadier rhythm, a second pulse pacing the room with her. Fate no longer felt like a word. It felt like something living under her ribs. She dressed in what Lyra had finished by candlelight, the seam smooth against her wrists, the hem lying true at her ankles. She cracked the shutter an inch. Down in the courtyard, routines had shifted into a cautious march. Wolves moved in pairs where they usually flowed. Warriors spoke with their hands more than their mouths. Eyes cut once toward the east tower and snapped away, as if attention itself could cost a person warmth later. Bootsteps slowed outside her door and kept going. Attention pooled and thinned, like a river testing its banks. The link pressed at the corridor in brief, guilty touches and hit the unseen line Dominic had set. Each time it rebounded with a sting that wasn't pain, only the memory of it. Discipline held. Suspicion spread anyway. Lyra came with a tray and a calm that made space to breathe. She set bread and broth on the table, checked the latch, and stood at the window long enough to read the yard like a map. Eat, Lyra said. Then keep breathing like you mean it. Thalia cupped the bowl. Heat loosened the fist under her sternum. Lyra's gaze tracked a change near the gate and returned. There's talk, Lyra said. Not where you can hear it. Where Stone repeats it later. They want to know why he keeps you. They want to know if keeping you makes them less safe or more. Thalia dipped bread and let the salt steady her. The bond hummed. It wanted to swell to a note. She kept it near and quiet. They'll test the door with mines, Lyra added. That's hunger wearing manners. Thalia glanced at the door and back, a small nod. Good, Lyra said. You know what a door can be. She pressed a warm palm to Thalia's shoulder and left, carrying her speed down the hall like a shield. The keep's rhythm stumbled. The link lifted toward the west and nodded. A thought moved through it, heavy as a hand between shoulders. Amon's presence, not loud, waited. Dominic's reply cut through clean. Orders that felt like rails laid under running feet. Ridge in pairs. River posts doubled. No mines to the East Hall. If curiosity cannot obey, fear will teach it. Assent came back layered and adequate. Adequate wasn't what this day wanted. A bell rang once, muffled by cold. Thalia stood at the window and watched patrols change with more caution than usual. Wolves with white on their muzzles took slower steps down the stair. Younger ones climbed faster and held still longer at the top. Steam from the kitchens bent under wind. For a breath it smelled like iron, then meat again. Her body readied itself as if it had heard a word no one had spoken yet. She set her palm to the door. Even when he wasn't there, the wood remembered his heat. Dominic stood on the parapet with the day's weight under his boots. The ridge lay sharp as a blade's back, the river dull and dangerous beyond the pines. He had built these walls for winters that eat the unprepared. For the first time in a long time, he felt he was holding them shut with will alone. Barrows prowled, patient and not patient at once. Mine. The word came like a vow today, not hunger. It promised violence and shelter with the same breath. He drew the pack thread tight. River pairs. West sweep at first light and last. Gate hinges now, not dusk. Keep your minds off the East Hall. If you must speak of it, do it to yourself. A scent rippled. Eamon's attention rose with a clean, practiced line. Thin at the bend, Eamon sent. I'll pull a pair from the copper road. No. The road stays watched. Understood. Dominic walked to the wall because motion gives discipline a place to live. He touched a latch, tested a chain, read the ice with 2 fingers against stone. Keeps that looked whole had taught him to fear the cracks nobody had nerve to name. He took the stairs to the east corridor when refusing to had become its own kind of weakness. The guard stood square, eyes forward, mind quiet. Dominic set his palm to the door. Heat climbed into his skin, and the bond rose, as if the wood and the heart behind it had learned each other. He opened and stepped in. Thalia stood with her fingers flat on the table, not bracing, grounding. The dress fit a body meant to move, not endure. When she turned, the bond answered like a muscle he trusted without thinking. He closed the door. Silence rose between them, not empty, heavy with what they wouldn't waste breath on. The pack is testing obedience, he said. It's a beta's job to press the line. It's a traitor's habit to enjoy it. Her look held his. She didn't offer a name for the ring. The room had one, whether they spoke it or not. You trust him with the ridge she sent along the bond until I don't. You trust me with this until I die. He tasted iron and torch smoke and the faint sweetness of apple on her skin from last night's basket. Varos leaned into that scent, nostrils flaring. Keep. You will stay here, he said. Not because walls fix truth, because I won't give this day a reason to try you. Her gaze didn't flick to the window or the door. The bond lifted like a quiet line. You feel it turning, and I feel it trying to. It wants what you don't give. It will want louder when it realizes that. He moved toward the fire and stopped halfway. The middle of the room, the only honest place when every instinct wanted a corner. The vision pressed behind his eyes with cruel clarity. Torches flaring, snow slicked to gray, a blade coming low from a hand that knew him too well. A ring flashing once. The split second where trust and control weighed the same, and he had to choose which to throw. He pulled a breath through tight ribs, Varos pressed up, not reckless, exact. Mine. Listen, he said. If it breaks today, you don't run. If you run, the link snaps, and you will wear a scent that gets a wolf hunted on sight. I know the smell. Know this too. If you walk anyway, I come through whatever wants to strip names off bones, not to chain you, to put my body between yours and what wants what I want. The bond jolted once and steadied. She didn't reach for him. She reached toward the part of him that pays first and told it she saw it. He stepped closer without permission and stopped with only heat between them. The backs of his fingers traced her cheekbone. Not possession, not permission. Contact that told 2 bodies they were still here, not yet a battlefield. Dominic. Her thought in his name filled the room. Varos bared teeth and lowered them a breath later, not because obedience soothed, because the wolf understood the strategy of waiting for a clean kill. Tell me what you feel, he said, before it sharpens. Pressure at the edges, threads thinning without breaking, footsteps choosing to be quiet for the wrong reasons. He listened into the house with the senses he trusted more than his own, the ones made by wolves who had walked night with him for years. Small shifts. No howl. A choice assembling itself out of ordinary motions. He set his will into the link like a knife placed where a hand can find it. All post hold. West sweep only in pairs. River eyes up. No mines near the east hall. If you have a question, ask it. If you have a rumor, kill it. Yes, returned cleaner. Lyra's attention flicked quick and sure. Kitchen clear. West wind turned a point. I'll keep the edges. He sent a scent shaped like gratitude siblings understand. The pressure in Thalia's chest climbed. She stood very still to make room for it. Some storms pass faster if you don't thrash under them. It wants to break, she sent, and it will try the courtyard. He nodded. He didn't ask how she knew. Knowing was the point of her presence here. It was also the danger of it. Listen, he said, I am. Not to the pack. To me. I am. He stepped close enough that the hem of his coat brushed her dress. His hand rose and stopped above her throat, not touching. A refusal that cost. The wolf went still, the way an animal freezes when a branch snaps, and everything depends on whether it was wind or a hunter. Heat, the small pull of the fire, the rhythm of two hearts that had learned each other well enough to find the count. He could mark her and make the world simple for a breath and burn down what needed patient strength to stand. He could walk out and call Restraint victory and lose the anchor this hour demanded. He dropped his hand and let it make a fist at his side. The bond burned once and cooled. Not now. She didn't answer with want. She answered with steadiness. When you are ready to choose the life that comes after. The thread tugged with Eamon's clean pulse. East wall clear, Eamon sent. I'll take the south patrol early. Pull pressure. No, hold your post. Understood. Dominic looked at the door as if wood could be a mirror. He turned back to Thalia with the one promise that could stand in a wind like this. I won't let them near you. You can't fight everything. I can bleed first. He set his palm to the door because contact steadied more than touch comforted. Warmth met him as if the room breathed. He opened the bond as clean as a blade leaving its sheath. If it gathers again, call me in the place inside my head where no one else goes. I know it now. He lifted the latch. The corridor's cold set its hand on his face. If you don't come back, she sent, I will break the door. Then I'll make sure the door prefers me. He closed it softly behind him. The guard's attention tightened. The pack thread swelled with work and friction, and the sound obedience makes when it rubs against pride. He walked the hall and set his shoulders under the keep, like a man who knows exactly how heavy his own roof is. Thalia stayed standing until her knees told her sitting would be the better courage. She sank onto the knit, palms on her thighs, breathing through the press building under her sternum. She waited for the tilt. She prepared to be level for someone else. Near noon, the house shifted like a body before a startle. A clatter turned to a shout, and then a hush with teeth. The mind thread rippled. Not alarm yet. The sound minds make when they realize they will have to choose who they are in public. Lyra tapped and slipped in with 3 movements: door, tray, latch. She set a small knife on the table and read the air. Eat, Lyra said. Put heat in you that fear can't steal. Thalia lifted the cup. The broth steadied the count she'd been using to keep time from becoming rope. He won't mark you today, Lyra said, eyes on the latch. He calls Restraint a wall. It's a bridge if he learns to use it. Thalia looked at the door and back. Lyra's mouth curved. Not quite a smile. Something sharper and kinder. Hold fast, Lyra said. When it breaks, don't flinch. If you flinch, he'll make a choice you'll both hate. The link tugged. Lyra was already down the hall when Dominic's mind pulled the pack tight. Not with volume, with certainty. All posts. Lock the east hall. West sweep now. River pairs. If you smell iron, your mind calls me first. Yes, answered deeper. The keep inhaled. The day set its teeth. Thalia lay her hand against the floor to feel the tremor arrive. Not fear, momentum. The prophecy had been pacing a cage for days. The latch had never been meant to hold. She reached for the bond and found him there, not as a sentence, as pressure that made standing easier. He felt her, and answered with a steady push that said, "I know." The hour changed shape. The keep leaned toward the courtyard. The line snapped taut. Dominic crossed the yard with the quiet walk that tells wolves to read his shoulders for orders, not panic. Torches flared in a draft nobody liked. A crate slipped and did not break because two bodies reached without looking and took the weight together. A breath later it would have hit stone. That was how close the day had come. Varos rose high. Keep. Mine. The vows were no longer separate. Eamon stood near the south steps, attention balanced forward and back, a man ready to move either way. Dominic did not change his pace. He let the pack feel his calm like a hand on a neck in the dark. If a hand lifts a knife inside my walls today, understand I am looking at it. The air seemed to nod. The yard paused, then resumed. The day went forward toward what it had always planned to be. He set himself at the center, because that is where a thing breaks when it means to. And in the room high above the yard, a girl who had survived by listening made ready to be more than a debt by standing very still and refusing to be small. The bond in her chest humming low, the prophecy turning in its cage for the last time. Torches flared hard in the wind and threw light across churned snow. The yard's careful rhythm buckled. A crate slipped, struck stone. Staves clapped like a misfired drum. The scent of iron arrived before iron itself. The pack thread surged. Too many minds at once pushing against a door never built to hold them. Hold the line. The order ran through the link clean and fast. It met fear, and fear shoved back. Wolves swung toward the gate. Others fell toward the arch. A few froze, listening for which way the world would tilt. Eamon stepped from the south stair shadow, useful as always, dangerous as only the trusted can be. His gaze flicked once to the east tower and away. His palm lifted, empty. The strike came low. From inside trust, from the range of beta urns, a flash of a ring in torchlight, bright as a lie. The blade went for the soft place under the ribs. Dominic turned into it. Instinct and winter fights made his body move faster than thought. Steel-glanced bone tore meat. Heat ran cold. The world narrowed to breath, balance, and the weight of the pack pounding fear and fury through the thread. Varos surged up, a force without apology. Mine. Keep. Dominic drove his forearm across Eamon's weapon arm and pinned it. Eamon's eyes were weather, calm, inevitable. Around them, the yard folded into confusion. Two wolves lunged, then checked, recognizing their own and stumbling back. A third body hit Dominic's back. He let the impact roll him forward, spun with it, and threw Eamon onto the snow. The knife skittered. Sparks leapt. Pain bit deep. The bond burned through Thalia before the shout reached the tower. Not sound. The clean, brutal message of pain moving across a link that hadn't existed a week ago, and now felt older than breath. The room tilted exactly as she had prepared for. She was already at the door when the guard sent for orders and got 10 at once. Locked. Of course. Lyra's small knife lay on the table, meant for bread and thread, not iron. Thalia jammed it above the latch and leaned. Wood complained. Hinges answered with a groan. The blade bit, slipped, bit again. The guard's attention slammed to the door, then tore away, dragged by a command that spun every trained mind toward the yard. She shoved harder. The bar scraped. The latch held. The hinge pins might not. She wedged a chair leg under the lower pin and levered with everything the years hadn't taken from her. A pop like a bone setting. The pin came free. The top lifted a hair. The door sagged. She pressed, felt the frame give, slid through into the corridor. The guard at the far end turned. Duty, fear, training fought for his face. He took a step. Back. She used her eyes because they were the only blade he would recognize without blood. He read something, her, the air, the bond, and stilled long enough for her to run. The stare took her fast. Cold blew up to meet her. A wolf barreled from a side hall with blood on his shoulder, bared teeth on reflex, closed them on reason. Behind him, Lyra's voice cut thin and sure. With me. Thalia pivoted into a narrow passage without touching Lyra's sleeve. Heat from the kitchen slapped and vanished as they crossed to another stair. Lyra threw a cloak without looking back. Wear it, or the cold will steal what you're saving. Thalia shoved her arms in as they took the last turn. The pack thread screamed, not broken, divided. 2 orders, equal weight, tore minds in opposite directions. Hold the gate, hold the Alpha. The bond went incandescent. Blood had a taste when it belonged to someone you refused to lose. She tasted it, and found breath anyway. They came out under the arch, through a service door built to keep work quiet. The world had edges. Torches leaned in a bad wind. Shadows moved like wolves trying to scare each other. Churned snow had turned to gray soup at the center. Iron stopped being imagination. Dominic had Eamon pinned, wrist and throat against the south stair. One side of his coat was dark with blood. He kept himself between Eamon's hand and the pack because wolves decide who to be by what leaders do with their seconds. Varos raked claws along his ribs, furious and perfectly aligned with the man. Keep. 3 wolves closed from the side, jaws hot with the idea of being useful. Lyra knocked the first off his feet from a shallow angle, struck the second in the hip, and turned him with a practiced shoulder. The third saw Thalia and checked, confusion cooling the bite. Thalia didn't try to be a wolf. She ran to the center and dropped to her knees in snow and ash. Eamon twisted under Dominic's forearm, the blade hand searching stone for leverage. Dominic's breath came measured by rage and discipline. Thalia set her palm just above the wound. Not on it, as if touch alone could command blood. The bond surged. Cold iron, black pain. She cut through both with a steady thought. Breathe with me. The wolf hit her like tide. Not to throw her off. To climb into the only structure that hadn't moved. Mine. She didn't fight him, she gave him rhythm. 1, 2, in, hold, out, hold. The count steadied Dominic under the animal. The thread shivered and eased. Something in the pack relaxed because something in the Alpha had. Steel scraped stone. Eamon flexed to free the knife. Thalia watched his shoulder, not his hand. She put a single word where only Dominic was listening. Left. He shifted an inch. Eamon lost his angle. The blade rattled away. The pack heard that sound like a bell and stopped teetering. Dominic slammed Eamon's wrist down with a clean, small violence. He could have ended it there. He felt the bond burn steady and chose not to, because a killing too early gives all the wrong minds permission to be brave the wrong way. Thalia met his eyes. The world narrowed to color, heat, and consequence. If she let go, he might still stand. Everything later would be worse. She did not flinch from the hate that would come if she failed. She did not wish for softer histories. I choose. She didn't shout it into the link. She set it in the bond like a stake hammered into frozen ground. It hurt. It held. A howl rose from the west wall, ragged with divided loyalty. Lyra hit the thread like a blade laid flat. Eyes on the Alpha. The yard shifted. Bodies recalculated. Wolves drew air like they'd remembered it existed. Eamon's face stayed blank. That steadied Thalia more than hate would have. Fanatics don't bargain, they burn. Look at me, Lyra told a pair squared to fight, voice quick and warm. If you put teeth to pack, I'll take them and let you earn them back in spring. One blinked awake and backed 3 steps, discovering he had feet. Dominic's palm slipped, blood making everything indecently slick. Eamon moved for Thalia, the friend's hand faint, turned to a throat grab. Varos surged with no sound. Dominic's elbow came down across Eamon's wrist. Something gave. Eamon's fingers opened. His face didn't change. Thalia pressed snow hard to the wound's edge to slow heat that wanted out. Breathe, not a plea. An order, a hand on a drowning face. He matched her count. The wolf settled, not satisfied, working. Keep. Around them, fights turned into decisions. Wolves who'd circled with hate stepped back with relief they'd deny later. Two who'd watched from the wall like theater found Lyra's eye and remembered that everything is work if you're unlucky. Eamon swallowed and spoke, not on the link, not to the yard, to the space between his mouth and Dominic's ear. You're losing them. Dominic answered with his body. The pack was watching. Words rot on the wrong ears. You're wrong, Lyra said, because sisters spend what's needed. Soft for a breath, then steel. And you're late. The thread tried to knot around 3 commands. Dominic pulled it flat with a taste of iron and old oaths. West hold, gate hold, yard, still. Yes came fast. Obedient, grateful to be told who to be. Eamon turned his eyes to Thalia. If curiosity lived there, it was cold. You made a hole, he murmured. That's how cold gets in. She let him have the line. He'd paid for it with his wrist and the last of his claim on this house. She kept her hand over Dominic's heat and kept counting. Not numbers now, reasons to breathe when a room wants to be a grave. Guard boots hammered under the arch. The river pair arrived late and angry. Wolves on the wall put shoulders back and remembered the version of themselves that never wanted this hour. A torch, guttered, flared, steadied. Lyra set 2 fingers deliberately against Eamon's throat where Dominic's hand pressed. She met his eyes with grief and honesty. Don't make me spit your name. He watched her with the blank of a man who'd finished choosing. Dominic felt the lack of purchase and chose the only hold left. He opened the pack thread to stone, kitchens, river posts, elder rooms. Eyes on me. The link obeyed. He felt attention slide into the shape he offered. Pain rode the edge of his thought, not regret. The pack looked because restraint owned by a body under pressure is the truest command they know. Thalia felt the turn and moved with it. She took her palm from blood to his wrist and held, not to stop him, to vow. His pulse met under her fingers and matched the count she had taught. I choose you, not prisoner, not debt, as your mate. The bond didn't spark. It thundered quiet, a river under ice. Varos lifted, pressed his head under that sound like a wolf accepting a hand. Mine. Dominic's grip didn't change. The yard did. Tension like a rope became hands, steadying, separating, lifting torches back to brass. Eamon shifted toward a conclusion he'd written long ago. Thalia watched the angle of his neck, the tilt of his jaw. Bodies telegraph truth when mouths won't. She laid 2 letters in the bond. Now. Dominic pinned the shoulder to stone. A soldier reached for help and found it in a pair of hands he hadn't trusted an hour earlier. Breath moved through the yard like warmth returned to a numb limb. Pain ran ice across heat in Dominic's side. Thalia pressed again, giving her body a task so her mind wouldn't run thin circles. She bent close enough for breath to touch his neck. Stay. He didn't need the word. He needed the sound. It stitched what pain had torn. Eamon's gaze cut once more to the east tower as if stone could deliver a reason he wanted. It didn't. Snow creaked. Blood cooled on cloth. Silence spread its cloth over the noise and asked everyone to decide who they were going to be now. Lyra read the next 5 heartbeats and filled them with work. West trade posts. Gate close the inner. Kitchen hot water to south stair. Healers to me. No mines east. If you have a grievance, marry it to work, or bury it in snow. Yes rolled back warmer. A few remembered to breathe through noses like they'd been taught. The pack tightened into a functional shape, scraped, bleeding, unbroken. Thalia didn't remove her hand. She folded fear flat under her sternum so it couldn't wave for attention. She looked at Dominic and offered the thing no one had ever let her give. With you. The bond answered like a vow made between teeth and kept with open hands. With me. The knife from the vision lay within reach on stone. The traitor's throat lay where endings are easy and living with ends isn't. Dominic stared at both and held still. Not indecision, discipline. The pack needed to watch him weigh the cost. Pressure gathered again, not toward blood, toward meaning. It rose through yard and house, through bones trained to survive by silence. Thalia breathed and made space. In the space, the next thing could arrive. Lights along the wall steadied. Wind turned a point. Somewhere a child cried and was lifted. Two elders leaned shoulder to shoulder and did not speak. Dominic's hand tightened a fraction. For the first time since the blade flashed, the yard was ready to listen. He met Eamon's eyes and saw not madness or hate, only a man convinced he could love a pack better by breaking it. The choice lifted, the one the vision had laid like a trap and revealed as a mirror. He didn't touch it yet. He looked at the woman with blood on her sleeve and a count in her breath that had become his, and knew whatever he did would be done with that sound in his bones. He drew air. The pack drew with him. He opened the link until it crowded out cold. "Stand down." The yard obeyed, not because he shouted, because restraint can be a command when a body chooses it under pressure. He kept Eamon pinned. He did not give the red order. He did not excuse cowardice. He held a life on the threshold long enough to decide what the pack would have to carry tomorrow. Thalia's fingers tightened, a quiet that meant, "I feel your choice. I'll hold while you make it." The bond hummed so hard Winter took one step back. Dominic's blood slowed. Barrows crouched, ready, not raging. "Keep." The house waited. The courtyard breathed, and in the small stillness that follows the worst kind of noise, the last act of the prophecy gathered itself to be heard. Snow hissed where torches spat. The yard held its breath. Dominic kept Eamon pinned and did not look away from the eyes that had once watched his back on river crossings and winter nights. Blood dried stiff on his coat. Heat beat under Thalia's palm and refused to fail. The pack thread hovered, taut and listening, waiting for the next note. Lyra widened her stance until her weight owned the space. A quiet warning written in bone. Hold. The order moved through minds like a steady hand. Bodies eased a fraction. Panic looked for a place to land and found none. Eamon's breath came shallow under Dominic's grip. A thin, sure voice tried to turn choice into weapon. "You've made them soft." No one flinched. Thalia felt the hinge the prophecy had promised swing into place. She read the gaps where fear collects, and sent a single thought across the small, bright channel between them. Left flank, draw two. Two wolves stepped without knowing why, closing a seam Panic had been sniffing. Dominic let the link open until every ear could hear law spoken low. "Eamon of Bloodfang, you lifted steel to your alpha inside his walls. You split minds under a winter sky. You chose breaking over holding." Silence moved over the yard like cloth pulled smooth. Some wolves had heard their parents speak sentences like these. Others had never expected to breathe them. Eamon didn't blink. "You chose a curse." Lyra's shadow cut across both men. He chose a warning and had the nerve to listen. Dominic tightened just enough to remind Bone of honesty. He did not turn to Thalia. He didn't need to. The bond stood behind him like a wall he hadn't known he lacked. The law's choice. Choice has cost. The cost is mine first. Healers reached the circle's edge and waited. Work honors order. Dominic lifted Eamon by wrist and scruff and set him on his knees on the stair. Witness, not humiliation. The pack steadied another inch. His judgment carried through stone and steam in the elders' rooms. "Eamon of Bloodfang, by my right as Alpha and for the safety you endangered, I spare your life. I strip your link. I name you rogue." The words changed the air. Eamon's jaw flexed once. Blank calm cracked at the edge. He took breath to speak. Dominic did not offer the pack's attention for a last cut. He set both palms at Eamon's temples and pressed. It was not force. It was shape. The thread tightened until it sang. Then something gave. The break was a quiet that hurt. Warmth left a room that had never noticed keeping it. Wolves recoiled in one motion, not with hatred, with the instinct that steps back from fire when skin is already burned. Eamon's scent turned, clean edges souring to the wild metal that says nowhere. He found Dominic's gaze. Mercy changes its name by morning. The link stayed closed to him. His thought reached for it like a hand for a ledge and met air. For the first time, his face showed a line of strain. "You leave by sundown," Dominic said to the yard. "Cross our border again and be met as rogues are met." Eamon stood on his own and swayed. He looked once at the east tower as if stone could choose differently, then at Thalia, with the cold curiosity of a man measuring a wheel he refuses to see turning. He made to speak. Lyra's eyes told him one word, without sound. Walk. 2 guards followed at a distance that acknowledged danger and refused fear. The yard opened and closed like a muscle. When the arch swallowed them, the pack remembered how to breathe. Dominic's knees loosened for a breath no one else felt. Thalia felt it. She held him with a palm at his wrist until the ground steadied. Healers slid in with hot water and clean linen. He lifted a hand and set their work in order. South wall bruises first. This blood can wait 5 beats. Yes moved through the thread with relief at work. That made sense. Lyra touched Thalia's wrist like a sister counting a pulse. "You have one job. Keep him where he is until it's safe to move." "I will." Dominic turned to Thalia as if remembering a language he had once known and thought he'd forgotten. Pain had made a narrow room and forced everything that mattered to live inside it. She stood in that room now. "You chose me." "I did. Not as prisoner, not as debt, and as your mate." The wolf pressed up under his skin and leaned into that permission like a beast into a hand. "Mine." The word carried reverence instead of hunger. Lyra's orders stitched the yard back together. West, trade posts. Gate, hold inner shut until I say open. Kitchen, broth to the south stair. Healers, rotate. Everyone who can walk and isn't bleeding, dig paths. No one is getting sick because the yard forgot mops exist. Yes returned with the small humor that means a place has survived. The healers pressed snow to cool the heat at Dominic's ribs and bound the cut firm. Thalia's thought moved slow and certain. "You should be on a bench in a warm room. When the house breathes without me holding it." Lyra arched a brow toward Thalia. "He is going to hate the next step and you are going to make him do it anyway. Ready?" "Ready." "Come inside," Thalia laid in the bond. "Let them see you walk. Then let go." Dominic scanned the ridge, the gate, the faces that had chosen to stay. He nodded once. Lyra flanked them as weather, not escort, keeping minds honest. The corridor met them with clean cold. The map room door brushed his knuckles as they passed, and he let it. Rooms are tools, not masters. At the east tower, the guard moved aside too fast. Dominic paused with his palm on wood. Warmth climbed into his hand like breath. Inside, the fire had held. Thalia stepped in and didn't look back. He followed. The door eased shut. Noise softened to an honest murmur. He dropped to one knee for ribs, not ceremony. Thalia lowered to both so their eyes met level. The bond rose in the space between them like new heat. His fingers found the steady beat under her skin. "This is not possession. It is truth." "I know. You can say no, I already said yes." He leaned until breath touched the place where vows live. He waited for her pulse to settle under the count they had learned together. He opened his mouth and closed gently. Not to take, to mark. To make a shape in the world that said this, and never less than this. Heat moved without burning. The bond roared and then flowed like a river freed from ice. Outside, the thread shifted, as if the house had inhaled for them. The deeper channel opened, clearer than before, not louder. "Hello? Hello?" Pharos exhaled, almost a laugh, almost a prayer. "Mine. Yours. Ours." He pressed his presence against Thalia, with the simple greeting wolves use at a den mouth. The pack felt it. Not teeth, not private vow. The change. The east tower's warning eased into warmth. A word moved along the link without orders. "Luna. It spread like spring does, inevitable and quiet. Whispers that had called her curse turned in place and became the kind you save for fireside telling. Lyra tapped once and entered. She didn't look at the mark. She read their eyes, adjusted a ledger no one else could see, and nodded. You have 10 minutes. Then walk the yard slow enough for bodies to decide. That's how it sticks. Thalia touched Lyra's wrist. Agreement, gratitude, and the humor that keeps winter from winning moved between them. Lyra's mouth warmed and sharpened at once. If anyone won't look, they can look at me. The door closed. The fire settled. Dominic studied Thalia's face at rest and learned the names of the lines she carried. Duty, Winter, Once Girl, Pack. He stood carefully. The room did not tilt. Thalia steadied him anyway because the bond liked to be included. You are mine. Yes, and you are mine. The link didn't bow. It made room. They stepped into the hall. The guard remembered not to salute because wolves are not soldiers. Lyra waited at the bend. Together they walked, as if nothing had changed and everything had. The yard met them with the low murmur of a place that had decided to live. Wolves paused and let their eyes do old math. Some minds flinched against old stories. Mute girl, debt, doom. They landed on what stood in front of them instead. Dominic set a hand lightly at Thalia's back, not to steer, to say here. A young wolf stared at blood on his knuckles until shame turned to stone. Thalia caught his gaze and held it until he remembered to look up. He breathed like someone reminded him how. Dominic drew the pack to him with the same plain accuracy he used to draw a bow. Wolves of Bloodfang. The hum rose. One animal. Many ears. We were tested. We chose each other. That is not softness. It is discipline. Aemon walks as rogue by my judgment. Any who follow him are rogues by their own. Our Luna stands, our house stands, eat, work, watch, heal. Yes came back warm and level, not cheering, endurance choosing itself again. Healers moved with bowls and cloth. Someone laughed. Cut it short. Let it come again. Laughter sits clean after fear when it earns its place. Threads that had pressed at the tower turned outward where they belonged. Ridge, river, gate. A few glances still flicked toward the east and away. New things take time even when they are right. Dominic paused at the stair where his blood had found snow. Wolves looked because they should, and then looked away because they trusted what the place had chosen here. He let the moment exist without carving a speech out of it. Lyra breathed in and out like a ledger closing. Good. Now do it for the next 100 mornings. Lyra, don't make me cry where children can see. Never. Liar. The corner of his mouth moved. The pack didn't need that softness. It needed the consequence. It had it. They made one slow circuit and returned under the arch. Work resumed. The day remembered itself. Back in the tower, Thalia climbed at a pace that admitted healers would be useful and pride would not. Dominic matched it. Inside, he sat with a sound that told her the bandage pulled, and he would let it. Quiet settled. Not empty. Full. The bond moved in that quiet like a heartbeat under a palm, steady as a road, learned by walking. He turned his face toward her with a rare attention that gives more than it asks. You were the end of me. Of the man who survives this alone. She let the truth make a place to sit instead of a wound to touch. Then I did what fate is for. I ended what needed ending. A small laugh, new and stubborn, lived in his chest. Varos leaned into it like sunlight and refused shame. Mine, hers, ours. Outside, the pack's hum found its winter rhythm. Wolves who would rise in gray light and do what the valley requires. Inside, the fire laid itself down to coals and kept its promise. The prophecy had kept its own. The hinge had turned. What he feared as doom had opened a door, and they had stepped through together. Every step after would carry both their names, and the house would remember.